Who has teachers in their lives to appreciate? There are so many times of year where people traditionally celebrate teachers, but you can certainly do it any day. There's Teacher Appreciation Week, end of school year, holidays, maybe even a first day of school treat. So I do have a few friends who have been teaching for decades. Don't tell them I told you that. But they have so many world's best teacher mugs and things like that. So I have put together in this video 9 things to sew that teachers will use and that you can personalize with charms. If you've never done jewelry making before, I promise, if you can sew, you can get these charms on here. So maybe you make them a little envelope and put their initial, this cute little pencil or scissors, a keychain for the art teacher, a lanyard. So all 9 projects have either a lobster clasp, a keychain, or a D-ring, something to attach a charm to. So before the 9 full tutorials start, I am going to show you how quick and easy it is and how inexpensive it is to add cute little charms to personalize something for the teachers in your life. Let's get started. Following this part of the video, I'm going to include the full tutorials for all 9 of these things. 3 different kinds of keychains, the envelopes that have the little tab, tissue holder with the tab, the lip balm holder, scrunchie lanyard, regular lanyard, and the lanyard with the safety breakaway that if it gets pulled, it's going to come apart so you don't get drug around by your neck. These are all fantastic ideas for teachers because they are things they're going to use, but they're not like yet another mug that says world's greatest teacher. Before you get into those and check the video description, it'll show you the timestamps if you want to jump to one that you know you want to try. But first, I want to show you this idea, and this is how to make any of these products personalized for a teacher. I bought this set of 110 teacher charms on Amazon. This was in 2026, depending on when you're watching this video. It cost $12.88. So basically averages out to 12 cents per charm. It did come with some of the jump rings. That's how you attach it, but they are too small to hook onto all of these things. So I got another set of jump rings that had both the silver and the gold, and links to all of this will be in the video description. So this gives me a lot of options for how many charms I want to put on something, how big the loops need to be. It came with these pliers and tweezers. I will admit, usually when I've done things like this, I've used 2 sets of pliers. We're gonna try this and decide. It also came with this thing. I have no idea what this is. If you do a lot of jewelry making and you know what I'm supposed to do with this, please let me know in the comments because I'm very curious. The idea is you can take any of these charms, or you could get a set of alphabet charms. So maybe you just add the teacher's initial, or maybe you add an initial and a charm or 2. Just something to make it a little bit personalized, and then do a really cute handwritten note. So let me just show you, if you've never done jewelry making, how easy this is to put together. Let's put something on this, because the colors go really well with these charms. Look at how cute these are. I mean, you have something for the science teacher, the art teacher, the coffee-loving teacher, the elementary school teachers. This does say best teacher ever, but it's a little more subtle than a coffee mug. I'm in love with this little bent pencil. It's kind of like a rainbow pencil. So we're going to use that. And let's see, we're going to pretend our teacher's name begins with an S. And I put some of the bigger jump rings from here in the center. So we're going to put those on. Let's see, should we do one more with a little bit more color? Let's add the scissors. I'm having a heck of a time getting this to be in focus so you can actually see what I'm doing with this jump ring. 3rd time is going to be a charm though. I'm going to start by telling you I did not like the tweezers and pliers that came with these jump rings. So if you're new to this and you want to try it, buy jump rings that don't come with the tools. Buy your tools separately and get 2 pliers. That's my recommendation. So now let me show you how this works. So a jump ring is a circle and it has a cut in it so that you can open it up. So what we're going to do is you're going to hold it with pliers on one side of the cut. Then you're going to take the second set of pliers and you're going to twist your wrists in opposite directions to open that up. See, now there's space in there so that we can put the charms on it and then we can add it to this lobster clasp. So I'm just going to add the S, the scissors, and the pencil rainbow. So I have all 3 charms on. If you wanted, you could add each of these charms to a separate little circle and put 3 jump rings on there, whatever you want. But this is the simplest way. Get a big enough jump ring to hold everything and to go around your D-ring or your lobster clasp. So I just stick that right on there. Then I'm going to grab the pliers again, and then you're just going to gently twist it back until that cut part meets and it looks like a circle again. That is how easy it is to do. So now, instead of just having this beautiful envelope, and I say just, you know, with a grain of salt, because this is wonderful if you're making a teacher something, but look now, it's a little bit extra special because it has the initial, the little pencil, and then when you turn it to the other side, you're gonna see the scissors. So I just think that that is a lot of fun. It's an inexpensive way to add a little bit to it. Now, if you are a person who likes to sew and sell, this is an excellent way to offer personalization. And we all know that personalized things are going to sell for a little bit more. You saw that took me, what, like 1 minute? We put 22 cents worth of teacher charms and probably about 12 cents for this. So, you know, maybe 32 cents and a minute to get that on there, but you're definitely going to be able to charge more whether you're selling in person or online. Now, if you're selling in person, it could be really fun. You could have, you know, whatever you're selling set out, and then you could show them the charm options, maybe just have them on a board so they can't grab them and take them away. And then you can just quickly put that on there and personalize. It makes for more of an experiential sale if you're doing it in person, more personalized options if you're selling online, where kids or moms or dads or whoever can pick exactly what they want added to their product. So that is why I have chosen these 9 things to put in this video of things to sell for teachers, because every single one of them will allow you to add charms quickly. So let me know in the comments if you like this idea, if you think teachers will like it, and which one you might be doing, either for Teacher Appreciation Week, end of year, holiday. Lots of times that we have during the year that it's just really nice to appreciate the people that are teaching our kids. If you're looking for a quick and easy project that is a great fabric scrap buster, also a fusible fleece scrap buster, let's talk about making lanyards. As you can see by my neck, and this pile of 15 lanyards that I just made this weekend, I have a little bit of experience and I want to share some tips and tricks that I have learned and figured out along the way to make this quick and efficient. Each of us probably thinks about lanyards in a different way, depending on our life, honestly. I always think about lanyards for teachers. There are many corporate offices where you're wearing a badge. Bus drivers are wearing badges. I always wear them at trade shows. I just came from a trade show, and I like to make them to match my outfit or to use my most recent fabric when I'm going to a trade show that is fabric related. So no matter how or when you think about lanyards, let's talk about how to make them. So to make a lanyard, you need a piece of fabric, either a single piece, which we're going to do in this tutorial, or you can piece some of your scraps together. You could use 5 pieces of fabric, but your end result needs to be 3 inches wide by 36 inches long. Then you need a piece of fusible fleece that is about 35.5 inches, but we're going to cut that when we're ironing, so don't necessarily cut it to size yet, by 3/4 inches wide. And if you don't have a long strip, this came off of some Pellon fusible fleece that I bought by the yard. You can take fleece scraps and just put them into 3/4 inch strips, and I'm going to show you how to put them together when you're ironing so no one will know you used a few pieces instead of one. And then finally, you need your clip for the lanyard, and it is a clip on a 1-inch D-ring. Making lanyards involves a bit of ironing and straight stitching. You're going to take your 36-inch by 3-inch piece of fabric or pieced fabric, whichever you prefer, and put it on the ironing board face down. You're going to fold it in half and iron the entire length of the fabric. Now that we have that folded in half, we are going to open it up and we are going to fold one raw edge into the seam, but do not press the seam because we want to keep that fold there so that we can do our next step. So you want to keep your iron at an angle that it will press this, but not press that crease. So we've creased the entire length twice. We did it in half, and then we have done this one side into the crease. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to be putting our fusible fleece right in the crease on the unpressed side. Now, fusible fleece has two sides. It has a soft side and it has another side that has the fuse material. So it's a little bit scratchy when you feel it. So just feel your way and make sure the scratchy part is on your fabric. Otherwise, it will end up on your iron. So we are going to take this piece of fleece and we are going to run it the entire length, but leave about a 1/4 inch without fleece up here and on the other end. Now, as I mentioned, if you have a long piece of fleece, I'm not going to trim it until I get it all placed in here. But I also promised to show you how to use smaller pieces and put them together, and it's so easy. You basically just place it down. So again, a 1/4 inch from that edge, and you're just going to make sure it is sitting right up against that crease down the center of the fabric. Make sure the ends are cut straight, and you're just going to butt it right up against it. Don't overlap it or you'll have a little bit of a bump. Have it right up against it and then just keep on going. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this side up over the fleece. And so now this fabric is going towards the center just like this one did before. Now the directions for fusible fleece, I believe, say to heat it for about 10 seconds. I don't do that on this project. I just kind of move pretty quickly because we're going to go over it again, and then we're also going to be sewing it in place on both sides. So if it doesn't fuse absolutely perfectly, honestly, no one's ever going to know, so it really doesn't matter. We're down to this second end, and you'll see my fleece is way longer than my lanyard, so I'm just going to have it laying straight there. And then I'm just going to take scissors and I'm going to snip so that it is about a 1/4 inch shorter than the end of the fabric. And we're doing that because we have to sew this into a loop and we don't need extra pieces of fleece in that seam. Now, one thing to note, when you get down here, it's really easy for this to kind of go this way and stretch and not be lined up this end. So just make sure you get this lined up nicely before you press the end. All right, we have ironed 3 times down the length now, and now we're going to do one more. Now what I like to do is I like to flip the fleece side over to be on top because that is going to really give us more heat to fuse that fleece strip onto the fabric if it didn't get fused very well when we were turning it. And on this step I do go a little bit slower because we want to make sure these creases are nice and firm because the next thing we need to do is go and sew. Now one thing that you can do is you can use a quilter's clapper or a tailor's clapper. Tailor's is just longer than the quilter's clapper. These are big pieces of wood with a nice groove in them to hold. And what you do is you just press on there. So while your fabric is still warm, you take this piece of wood and you just press down. And this does 2 things. It absorbs a little bit of the heat from the fabric, and it also sets that crease better than if you just use the iron. It's not totally necessary, but it is a great tool. It's especially helpful if you're doing quilt blocks with a lot of little seams just to get everything nice and flat. And I do find it helpful for this as well. So now it is the width of a lanyard. And you'll see on one side you have a little bit of space where you can see the overlap. So this is the back and this is going to be the front. So now let's go to the sewing machine and start stitching this together. If you want to pin or clip this together, you can, but I don't really find that it is necessary. It's easy enough if you've pressed it well to keep it folded. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we are going to sew down this open edge. So not the side that's completely folded, but the side that has a little bit of flap. And you want to do it from the back side where you can kind of see that overlap just to make sure you're getting all of the layers. We are going to start about 4 inches down from the end. I've tried closer, just makes it unnecessarily difficult to sew the 2 ends together later. So start 4 inches down and finish 4 inches before the end. Sometimes because you get in a little bit of a zone doing these straight, I will put a clip just to remind me where to stop. And as I mentioned in my intro, I'm going to use white thread so you can see what I am doing. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up. And that is going to help me not have a big bird's nest knot on the back. You know how sometimes if you just start and you go forward and backwards, sometimes this thread will get pulled into the bobbin and it makes this awful noise, and then you have this big old mess. Well, that big old mess would end up being on the front of your lanyard. So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And to do that, I'm going to pull the bobbin thread up. And here's how you do that. You're going to put your lanyard underneath your foot where you want to be sewing, and you're going to put your foot down. Then you're going to hold onto the thread, the top thread, and you're going to put your needle down and back up and give it a little tug. And sometimes that bobbin thread doesn't come up enough to really grab it with your fingers. So I always have tweezers handy. So you're going to pull that up. So this is the bobbin thread. This is the top thread. I'm going to put them both behind the foot, and I'm going to hold them. Usually I hold them with my left hand, but then you can't see a thing. We're going to hold both of these threads. I have them in my right hand, and I'm just going to go forward a few stitches and then backwards a few stitches. Okay, that's going to knot it. I also recommend using a walking foot, because even though this looks like a small project, we're actually sewing together 4 layers of fabric and 1 layer of fleece. So having that walking foot where it has feet on the top to help pull the top, as well as those feed dogs on the bottom, is going to give you an easier and smoother result. And then we're just going to straight stitch until we get to that clip, which is 4 inches from the other end. So we have stitched the entire length, and you'll see right there, that's just a nice flat back and forth. Normally I would use a color that coordinates with my fabric so that this wouldn't be very visible like it is now, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I'm using white on black. Now I'm going to give you a word of warning. This is where I sometimes get messed up, especially if I'm doing a lot at once, because you're kind of in a zone, right? You're ironed and you're sewing and you're like, okay, next step is to put these ends together. Yay, right, go. But you have to put the clip on first. Do not forget this step, or you will need a seam ripper and you will have to take this seam out, put the clip on, and start over again. When I made 15 of them, I think I had to do that 4 times before I finally remembered. So you're just going to slip this D-ring right on the fabric and just move it out of the way. Doesn't matter which direction, we'll work on that next. Then you're going to fold your fabric in half, and you're going to make sure that the stitched lines are together and that nothing is twisted, okay? So that's really important too. You don't want to sew this together where it's twisted. Now you're going to take this top edge and you're just going to start unfolding. So I unfolded the one side, unfold the other, and we're going to get this to match up. So there's going to be the 4 sections. Now I use 2 clips, and I have discovered that putting this clip on the side, so along the long side of the lanyard, makes this stay lined up better than putting it up here, because when you put it up here, you have to move it faster. If you put it down here, you can leave it on the whole time you sew, that 1/4 inch. I just need to open this last part, and then just a double check to make sure you have it lined up right. The fleece should be opposite the fleece. All right, so 2 clips on the second part and down there. Now we're going to turn this, and we're just going to do a 1/4 inch right across the top to join the loop. Back to the iron, and if you are doing a bunch of these, this is where you could have a friend in charge. You could have 1 or 2 people sitting at a sewing machine doing all this straight stitching and these ends, and then you could have somebody else in charge of ironing the fabric together and putting the fleece in, and then also doing this step where the first thing we're going to do is we're going to press that seam open flat so we don't have a big lump there. That does press out that seam a teeny bit, but no worries. You can get that folded back down really easily. So now we're just going to get these 2 sides folded in again so that it's going to be straight. And then we're going to press that. You do need to press a little bit more where it is sewn together because it's a little bit more of a lump. I would definitely use a clapper on that if you have one. So now all we need to do, this is again the front, is we're going to sew between those two sections to finish closing that up. Then we're going to sew all the way around this other side, and then we just have to secure this. So irons can be turned off if you're just making one, and back to the sewing machine. Now we're going to sew the open part. So it's about 8 to 9 inches where we left it open to sew the loop together. And we are definitely going to take the time to raise the bobbin because again, that knot is going to be on the actual lanyard. So now the lanyard is sewn all the way around one side. So now you're just going to turn it around and we're going to sew on the edge of the other side. This gives it consistency. It also makes sure the fabric stays folded the way it is, and it keeps that fusible fleece secure inside. So this is just super fast sewing. And as you're doing this, you're just moving this hook so that it stays well out of the way of your sewing. Okay, so now we have a big loop of fabric sewn on both sides, so it looks good. And we have this hook just kind of floating around. We don't want that floating around. We want to secure that guy. So I'm going to feel again and find where I put it together, so where that stitch length is, and then I'm going to just pull to get the hook at the opposite side. Now before we just do a little stitch back and forth here, you want to make sure you have the outside of your lanyard fabric on the outside. So just kind of flip it over and see which side has that fold. Okay, so this is correct. If it wasn't, all you would do is you would flip this fabric around inside the D-ring. So you have plenty of time to do that before this step. That's why I just throw them onto the lanyard. It doesn't matter which direction, but before you sew it, it does. We're just gonna go straight across. And then we're going to go back. You could either stop there or you could go one more time. And there it is. This lanyard is done. It looks pretty good with the white, even though I probably would have done the black just so that you wouldn't see where we sewed back and forth. And now it is ready to join my collection of lanyards that I have available for me when I need them. They could be great gifts for anyone that needs a lanyard. They could be easy things to sew and sell. They could be great for groups. Like say you have a kids choir going to New York and they are going to be wearing ID. You know, you can get a group of people together and you can whip up a bunch of lanyards that are going to match to make it more coordinated and also even easier to know that they're in your group because it's not only the name you're looking at, but you can see that fabric. These would also be great for Teacher Appreciation Week. You could have a group of people get together and split up the work and make it go really fast and make one for every teacher and staff in the building. Or if you wanted to do it as a teacher appreciation gift, you could do one for each month of the year. Welcome to my second How to Sew a Lanyard video. I recently did one where I made a lanyard like every lanyard I have ever worn. One loop of fabric with a hook on the bottom. But what I love about YouTube is that I learn things as much as I try and show things. So some of the comments informed me that in the United Kingdom, these are illegal. I had no idea. They have to have a quick release hook so that if it gets pulled on, it comes apart nice and easy. It's a lot safer now that I think about it. So I quickly went online, found these quick release hooks, and decided we needed to do another video. I was really surprised to discover that making them with this hook is easier than making it without. That was a nice surprise. So if you want a little bit of a safer option where if somebody yanks on it, it's going to come off, then this is the video for you. If you want the one loop, I will put the link below here so you can see how to do that as well. So let's get started. You're going to need this lobster clasp with a 1-inch D-ring, okay? And you're going to need this quick release clip. It's a little harder to pull apart without the fabric on the sides, but it comes apart really well with the fabric on the sides. I did find these to be a little more difficult to find online than I expected, but make sure you're looking for quick release clasp and not just a buckle. You don't want to have to squeeze it to get this open. You want it to open automatically if your lanyard is yanked on. So that's super, super important. I almost bought the wrong thing. All right, now let me show you how easy these are to make. Similarly to this first lanyard that I made, which is just a loop with the hook on it, if you want to make one with this clasp, it has a quick release, a little bit safer. You're going to start with a long piece of fabric. So I have sewn together some of my scraps from my Spring Barn Quilts collection. I just love this quilt block toss, and cut it to 37 inches. For the one without the hook, you cut to 36 inches, but with the hook, because we're going to be folding down on both of these, I cut it to 37. Now, if you have a larger person, you want it a little bit longer, you can make it longer, obviously, but 37 is a great way to start. So this one, I just sewed these pieces straight. You'll notice on this one, I combined 3 pieces and did them at an angle, just like I was doing quilt binding. So you can do whatever you want. And of course, you can just do a single strip of fabric like this one. Now, similar to the first one, we got lots of ironing to do. So you're going to take your fabric and place it face down on your ironing board. We're going to press each end down 1/4 inch, and we are going to fold it in half, matching these long raw edges, and press all the way down the fabric. Now we are going to open it back up. We are going to do a long pressing number 2. We are going to fold this raw edge into this fold, but make sure you don't press that fold back open. We want to keep that fold for our lanyard. So we're just going to fold that down, and you're going to put your iron at an angle so that it's going to create that second crease, but not touch the first crease. Now that we have our ends pressed in, folded in half, it's time to add our fleece. And what we are going to do is we are going to put that lined up right into that crease mark. Now, the thing about fusible fleece, you want to make sure you put the fused part down so it never touches your iron. So if you just rub it between your fingers, one side is fluffier, one side's got a little bit of scratchiness to it. That is the fusible product. So you want to put the scratchy side down. And we are going to place the fleece right under this fold, tucks in there nicely, and then you are just going to put that fleece against the fold the entire length of the lanyard. Now my piece is too long, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get to the end, and then I am going to trim that so that it lines up with this crease where the end folds over 1/4 inch. I'm just going to do that with my scissors. It can be a little bit down, doesn't matter. But let me show you, if you have extra pieces of fusible fleece hanging out, you can cut them into 3/4 inch strips, and you can piece them together in here. So let's pretend this wasn't long enough and it only came to here. All you do is you take your second piece of fleece, double checking which side is a little scratchy and which side is softer, and you just put them right next to each other. So you just butt them up to each other, and you just keep going. No one will ever know if you have one or multiple pieces of fleece inside this lanyard once it is sewn together. Now, I bet you know what the next step is. We are going to take this raw edge and we are going to fold it up over the fleece, and we are going to press this long edge, paying attention to making sure this stays lined up nicely. And make sure as you are folding this up that you're not pushing that fleece over that crease. Hey, it rhymes. Now this fusible fleece, I use the 987F from Pellon. I just always keep it around. And I believe the instructions say to press for like 10 seconds to have it really adhere, which you can tell that I am not doing that at the moment. And that is okay. So it's not totally fusing, but my goal here is to just get this crease in. And we're going to be ironing over it one more time a little bit slower. That will also be attaching that fleece a bit better. And then finally, it's such a skinny piece of fleece, and we are going to be sewing down both sides. It's going to stay in place whether it's perfectly fused or not. Okay, now we're going to do our final pressing, and for this one, I am going to use a tailor's clapper, or sometimes called a quilter's clapper. The quilter's clapper is usually a little bit shorter because it's used for quilt blocks. I have both sizes. I like a longer one when I'm doing a long project like this. So what we're going to do next is we are going to make sure this stays folded, and we're going to be doing that final fold to make it 1 inch like a lanyard should be. I like to fold it so the fleece is on top so that it gets the most heat as we do this last step. And this one I do go a little bit slower so that that fuse has time to really adhere the fleece to the fabric. And you can just do this like this, no problem. But the reason I like these clappers is you press it down on there and it absorbs the heat. And if you're using steam, it will absorb any of that moisture into the wood and it makes it flatter. So it gets those seams even more creased and it cools off your fabric so you're not moving really hot fabric. So that's just another one of those tools that if you have the budget and you're looking for something that's handy but not necessarily vital, you might want to consider a quilter or tailor's clapper. And if I was only to get one, I would get the tailor's because it's longer and it'll work for shorter or longer things. I really like the scrappy look of this. If you're going to make one of these, I mean, who doesn't need a lanyard? What would you do? Would you do single strips of fabric? Would you use up some fabric scraps and sew them together so you have multiple prints on one lanyard? Let me know what you're thinking. If I was doing a lot of these for gifts, like for the office or teachers or stocking stuffers, I would probably do single pieces of fabric just because it's a little bit faster to not have to piece things together. But if I had an overabundance of fabric scraps and lots of time, I might piece it all together. I don't know. Well, a lot depend on my mood. But let me know in the comments what you would do. Also, let me know in the comments who you will be making these for. And don't forget to make some for yourself. All right, so now we have this all pressed. We have done 1, 2, 3, 4 times down the whole strip. So now it's time to take it to the sewing machine and stitch along the edges. I decided to put a few clips just to keep this in place down the strip that we just folded. Now let's look at how this works. So one side, you just see all of the fabric. On this side, you have a little bit of overlap and this is where it opens, where the fabrics are folded over. So when you can see that extra fold, that's the back. This is going to be the front. Now that's going to matter when we put our hooks and our clip on there. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we are just going to sew the entire length. We don't need to sew across that end yet. We're going to do that when we add the clip. So we're going to sew down both sides about 1/8 of an inch from the edge, or just make sure you are catching all of this fabric. So whatever you need to do to get that done. So this is just really quick, straight stitching. This is also, as you notice, 4 pieces of fabric and fleece, so it's a little bit thick. So if you have a walking foot, you definitely want to use it. It is going to help feed all of this fabric through more evenly. And then I'm also going to use what is called a leader fabric, because when we're starting on the very edge and have a walking foot on, or even don't have a walking foot on, sometimes your sewing machine gets a little bit stuck and it can't get it started, right? It can't get it fed because it's going from nothing to pretty thick. So the answer to that is to put this leader fabric behind it. You're not going to sew on this. Your machine is just going to use it to help everything move smoothly. So what I've done is I just took a piece of scrap fabric, a piece of scrap batting, folded that over and sewed down both sides. Doesn't have to be pretty, doesn't have to be big. This is just going to be a workhorse that I keep near my sewing machine for projects just like this. So I'm going to put the leader fabric under here. I'm going to put my lanyard here. And now we are going to raise the bobbin thread so that we don't end up with a big bird's nest knot on the other side, which happens to be the front of our lanyard. So we're going to have the leader fabric lined up with the lanyard fabric, put the foot down, hold on to the top thread, put the needle down, still holding this thread, pick the needle up and give it a little pull. And you'll see that bobbin thread now popped up. You're going to grab that and you're going to pull that. Then you're going to put both of these threads under the foot and pull them to the back. Now I'm going to go about 3 stitches forward, and then I'm going to go backwards, still holding these threads. And now I'm going to have a really nice knot. And did you see how nicely that moved because we had this leader fabric back here? So now I'm just going to sew all the way down the side. And now we're just going to sew down the other side as well, just to really hold that fleece in there and give it a more consistent look. First thing I like to do so that I don't forget is to put on my clasp with the 1-inch D-ring. So I'm just going to thread that on there. Next, we are going to attach both of these ends to this quick release clasp. So you're just going to pull it apart into the two pieces. When you're adding your clasps, this is when it's important to pay attention to the front and the back of your lanyard. And remember, the back is where you could kind of see these two pieces folded together, and the front just looks really good and flat. So you're going to take it with the front up, and you're going to feed that through there. And you're just going to fold it back about a 3/4 of an inch so that it is folded to the back of the lanyard fabric. Now we are just going to sew straight across, and I'm going to go back and forth, like forward, back, forward. So it's nice and strong. And then I'm also going to be using the leader fabric again and pulling my bobbin up. I'm going to fold my leader fabric in half so that it is pretty much the same thickness as what I'm going to be sewing, because that's really going to help my foot and my sewing machine get everything moving smoothly. Now we're going to take the other half of the clip and do the same thing, making sure we feed the front of the lanyard through and then fold back so that the front is folding back onto the back. So now our hook is on, but our clip is still free floating, and we don't want that. So what you're going to do is you're just going to hold the clasp and pull that back so that your lobster claw is centered down the end. Then we are going to just sew, just like we put on the clasps, straight across to secure that, and then we will be done. And I'm going to use my leader fabric again. And as with every other step, we are going to pull up our bobbin thread. We have a super safe, quick release clasp lanyard that we can use for keys, ID badges, trade show badges, and anything else you want to hang. So let me know in the comments how you're going to make them, what you're going to hang on them, and who you're going to make them for. Happy sewing! What do you think of my new lanyard? I'm pretending I'm cool and that I work in an office where I need a badge. But I don't. But I needed something to put on here to tell you this is another lanyard sewing tutorial. This time we're doing these very popular scrunchy elastic lanyards that seem to be taking the country by storm. I don't know, maybe the world, but definitely the US. It is made with 3/4 inch elastic, and then I'm going to show you how to use pre-cut fabric. So if you're a fan of using these for quilting or other projects and you have a bin like me of extras, we're going to put these to use. If you don't have them and you never use them, not to worry, all you're going to do is cut strips of fabric that are 2.5 inches wide by the width of your fabric. Everyone is going to be good to go with this. Let me show you what you need and how easy these are to make. Got my bucket out that has strips from a few different collections. If you don't buy pre-cut strips like this, you're just going to cut lengths of fabric that are 2.5 inches wide. And honestly, you're going to have a lot less lint when you're doing this project because boy, oh boy, does that fray, which is why supply number 1 is a lint brush. You're going to have this stuff all over you. But if you sew with these, you know this already. This is not news to you. The next thing you're going to need is 35 inches of 3/4 inch wide elastic. I highly recommend a tube turner. It's going to make everything go a lot faster, but you will need a safety pin still to thread the elastic through the tube. A 1-inch key fob, and highly recommend getting the pliers with that. It works so much faster and easier than using regular pliers. Then I add a little lobster clasp. I've seen people use all different kinds. So if you have a bunch of these sitting around and it has a different end to it, maybe it's got a long one more like this, then use what you have. But I love these ones that have just a little circle to put on the end, because then it isn't going to float around all that much more. It's going to stay pretty close. It's not like flying an inch to either side. Then I'm just going to be using a teeny tiny ruler and rotary cutter because we're going to play with how we put these strips together. So let's get the supplies out of the way and talk about the fabric. So for one of these lanyards, you're going to use 2 of the 2.5 inch pre-cut strips. And I've done it 2 different ways. So this one, I just took 2 strips, I sewed them together, and I put them on the elastic, which gives me this look. The dark color, which is strip number 1 on the one side, and then the strip number 2 color on the other side. If you wanted it to look much more consistent, you would just use the same color strip twice. But I thought, well, let's just see what this is. Now you'll also notice that you can kind of see what the icons are on here, but it's more subtle because the fabric is so gathered. Now this one, it is again 2 strips, and I cut one of them in half and left this one plain. That gives me the teal at the bottom on both sides, and then this kind of lime green that goes around the neck. So a little bit of a different look. Since I showed you one where I just sewed 2 strips together and how that looks, and one where I cut 1 strip in half and sewed those together, let's do one where we cut both strips in half and make it a little bit more of, you know, color blocking. Let's do something totally different. So let's take a red, and we'll do something with like no icons this time. Let's do this wood and black. So we're gonna go bold this time. You can see all that lint. Actually, I'm gonna get some of it off before I even start. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the selvages off the bottom. This one has been in that bin for a little bit, so it's kind of folded up. One thing I love about scrunchy stuff is you don't have to iron. So you don't have to iron these tubes open before you put it onto the elastic because it's going to get all ruffled. And I showed the difference and that it wasn't a difference when I did the scrunchy key fobs. So I will put a link to how to do the scrunchy key fob video in here as well. But trust me, now we already know that we do not need to iron anything. So now I've opened these up to the folds. I'm just going to cut each of these in half. It doesn't have to be an exact science. If you wanted to cut it into more pieces, you could. If you wanted this to look even more color blocked, you could cut this into 4 pieces. But we're just going to do like each section in 4 pieces, so you would have 8. We're just going to do 4. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sew red, black, and we're going to stitch these together with a 1/4 inch seam. Off to the sewing machine. So I'm going to use my little scrap leader fabric to get my thread started so I don't end up with it pulled under and knotted on my project. Just take a few stitches and then 1/4 inch seam across here. And sew these 2 together. Now I'm just going to cut off that leader fabric. Four pieces, we have the 3 seams together. Now it is time to sew it in half. So I'm just going to start at one end. I'm going to fold that right sides together. Use my little leader fabric again. And this is really long, so it's about 80 inches long. I just have it draped down on the floor, kind of in between my legs, because I don't feel like pinning it. Really no need to take the time to do that. So what I do is as it's coming onto the table next to my sewing machine, I'm just putting it together. So I'm just kind of doing it as we sew. And we're sewing this together with a 1/4 inch seam as well. When you get to the seams, I've tried it both ways. The first one, I tried it where I just sewed it where they were flat like this. And then the second one, I opened the seams. Actually found it easier to get the elastic through when I did it like this and not opened because nothing caught on that seam. You just want to make sure that you put all 3 of these seams, or however many you have, going in the same direction. So we're going to have, actually I'm going to just flip it so that they're all facing me. So it's really easy for the foot to go across there. I don't have to hold it down. Now make sure you do that seam in the same direction. Do the seam towards you. Now because we're going to use a tube turner, when you get to the end, you want to sew across the end. You want one end closed. And I know you might be thinking, but then how's the elastic going to go through? We're going to cut that off after we get it turned. But it is way easier to turn this super, super long tube with a tube turner than having to use the elastic. Now, one thing that I love about this style is they're super fast. They take like 10 to 15 minutes to make, and there's no ironing. You're basically sewing together this really long strip, turning it right side out, putting the elastic in. That's honestly what takes the most time, is getting the elastic strung through this 80-inch piece of fabric, and then adding the hardware on the end. I'm going to share some tips and tricks I have figured out from making a few of these for turning this efficiently. And I am using a Dritz tube turner, the big one, for 1/2 inch to 1 inch fabric tubes. Now, I've done some other projects like this, and the boba tea lovers like to tell me how they use a boba straw. I don't know that a boba straw is going to be strong enough to turn this long of a tube, because you do put a bit of pressure on this thing. But if you try it, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, you might have to pony up under $10 and get one of these. So we're just going to put this in, and then we just need to push it to the very bottom, which, yay, makes more lint. I'm trying not to leave here covered with that. So now we have the tube at the very bottom where we sewed across, and we're going to use the dowel rod to turn it right side out. So you take the more pointy end, doesn't actually matter for this because we're not going to get that squared off, and you push the fabric into the tube. Now here is where it gets tricky, because we have all this fabric and this tube's only this long. So I tried it the first time where I was kind of holding it, and then you get to a point where you can't scrunch any more fabric on here. And if you get it scrunched too tight, it gets hard to move. So then you start pulling it back and the stick started coming back. So I have found that the easiest way is to keep it kind of like this. I can feel the stick. So here is the top of the tube and here is the top of the stick. So I'm holding onto that stick as I am starting to pull that fabric off. Then I place it on the table. So I'm standing the tube up on the table, and then I'm pushing down until we have lots of fabric again. Then I'm grabbing that stick again, and I'm pulling that fabric off. So you're just going to repeat that. This is way faster than trying to deal with the stick coming out of this end. And keep pulling until this becomes flat, because as I said, if you let this get too bunched up down here, it gets tricky. This is way easier on your hands too than doing the safety pin method of turning this right side out. And we have to use the safety pin method to get the elastic in here. So save your fingers for the first part. Now we can see that it's coming out. So we're just going to hold both of these. See, I got it a little too bunched and it's too tight and it won't flip. So then you just pull it back this way so that you can get it to keep going. And you're just going to be pushing and pulling to get this all right side out. Okay, so now we can just pull the plastic off. We don't need the stick because we don't have to worry about getting that nice and square, because that's not the point of this project. So now I'm just going to get this stick out. And honestly, the easiest way to do this is to just hold it over the floor and let it drop. So we're going to take the end that is sewn. I'm just going to kind of flatten it out because we want a straightish edge, and then I'm just going to clip. Doesn't matter really how much you take off. If you take 1/2 inch, inch, 1/4 inch, that's not going to matter. You're not going to notice a difference with your lanyard. Now, I love that we don't have to go to the ironing board and iron this flat like for other projects. It's one thing I love about doing scrunchy stuff. We're going to take our safety pin, put it on the end of the elastic, and you guessed it, we're going to thread this through. Now, I've also played around with worrying about where that seam is. Like, oh, I want to try and keep the seam in the center of one side of the elastic. It doesn't matter. You are not going to know because it's going to be so scrunchied. So we're just going to be threading this through. You don't have to worry about where you're at for a while, but the goal is to get the end of the fabric to this end of the elastic. So you can't just keep going with wild abandon all the way to the end. We're going to focus when we get closer, because we need to sew this here before we finish getting this elastic all the way through. Now, if you are going to be making a lot of these, this would be a great part to do while you're sitting watching TV. Or, I don't know, you could hire your kids to do it if they're looking to earn money. Speaking of kids, if you have kids that want to learn to sew, this could be a great project for them to do if they're making something for teachers, like for Teacher Appreciation Week or the holidays or end of year. It's all straight sewing. It's pretty quick. And it's a bunch of threading, and it's something that they could be pretty proud. And teachers always need lanyards for their ID badges. They could also make it for family members that have ID badges for work. I mean, lots of people are using lanyards for keys, for ID badges, for whatever. So you'll see we're getting close to the end. We've got this pretty tight. So I just kind of keep pushing this fabric down, but you have to be careful, because if you lose this too far into the fabric, you're going to have to start over. If you only lose it about 1 inch, you can use tweezers to grab it. Whoop. Oh no. Look, I just said don't do it too far. So mine slipped in really quickly. It's there. This is here. Let's see if we can scooch it. Oh no. I've got some long tweezers. These are reverse tweezers. I love them. So when you're not squeezing it, they're closed, and when you squeeze it, they're open. So I'm going to put them in here. Yep, I can get to that elastic. I'm squeezing to open it, grab the elastic, pull that out. It's always so much fun when things happen that I tell you to be careful not to happen, because it's a pain. All right, so there's my elastic. There's the end. I'm going to put a clip on that because I do not want to have to do that again. I'm just going to jump to the sewing machine really quick and just go back and forth really close to the edge, like forward, back, forward, back. And I sewed about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. We don't want it too far because the key fob hardware will only cover 1 inch of your end fabric. It's just to hold the elastic in place while we finish threading it through the rest of the tube. So that's attached. So now we're going to just finish and just keep moving the scrunchy part down, the fabric down, just like when we turned it right side out. If it gets too tight in one spot, it won't move. But keep it flat 1 inch to 2 inches at the bottom. We don't want it super scrunched when we go to put on our key fob hardware. So while I am doing this, let me know in the comments who you might make this for. There we go. We have it out the other end. And now what we're going to do is we're going to line this end up with this end. Now it's really important to make sure you don't twist this. You don't want your lanyard to be like twisted around a couple times. So you want to stretch it out and bring these ends together, and then do this to make sure it is straight and there's no twist in it. Now we're going to go back and we're going to sew this a little more securely, about 1/4 to maybe 1/2 inch from the end, so that it flattens it a little bit and it gets that nice and secure. So I just went back and forth, nothing organized or neat about it, no squares, nothing like that. But I also didn't stay in the same line. This is very purposefully across the elastic a little bit because that's going to be a stronger hold for your elastic. Now I'm going to grab my little trash bin and I need to trim this end flat. We don't want a bunch of stuff sticking out because there's not a ton of space where this is going to hold, and we want it to be nice and flat against that end. So now we have a nice flat edge. Now it is time to grab our pliers and our hardware. This is again 1 inch key fob hardware, and that you can put your fabric in it first, then put on the pliers. I find it easiest to put this in the pliers and line up the edges. So the edge of the key fob hardware is at the edge of there. See, like that. And you'll notice there's a little spike in there. That is going to push into the fabric and elastic to help hold it. Now, some people also have mentioned that they add a little bit of glue, like that E6000 glue in here, just to make sure everything stays secure. I think it's going to be okay, but if you feel better putting glue in there, by all means, go for it. So I'm holding it really gently because I don't want to be squeezing it until I get the fabric in. Then I put the fabric in and I check it from the edges. I want to make sure it's not hanging out. We want it nice and centered. And then I squeeze really hard. You want that nice and tight. Now, because this is pretty thick, I like to go back on the sides and give it a little extra squeeze to just get that clamped down as well as possible. Okay, so now we have that on, but you can see that it's like super scrunchy here and barely anything here. So you're just gonna go through and just kind of organize the fabric so it's more evenly spread around the elastic, which is kind of fun because, you know, the elastic's stretching as you're doing that. This is another good watching TV project, maybe. Sitting in the car waiting to pick up the kids or the grandkids from some activity or other. Now, if you're going to be using it for keys, you could just put your keys right on here and you could skip the lobster clasp. This is more for like ID badges and things like that. So I'm just going to string that on here like it's a key. And there you go. Because of the cost of materials and the time that it takes to make and their popularity right now, quite honestly, these are definitely something to consider if you are looking for ideas to sew and sell. That said, just remember that some things sell better in certain places than others. If you're selling online, if you're selling in person, and also taking into account the trends and the styles of the area as far as your fabric choices and things like that. If you are a fan of pre-cut fabrics and these 2.5-inch pre-cuts and you have some extras lying around, you're like, what on earth am I going to do with them? This is the perfect project for that. Now, I have some other projects that use these 2.5-inch pre-cuts. I will put links below the video if you want to look for more ways to use your extras. All right, so what do you think? Is this a style that you think you're going to make? Who are you going to make it for? Yourself, your family, gifts, selling? Let me know in the comments. And I would love to know your thoughts about how you would put it together. As I said, this is one. I used 2.5-inch pre-cuts. I just kept them straight. So we have the one color on the one side, one on the other side. This one, I cut both of them in half, so it gives a little bit more variety of red, black, red, black. And then the one I have on my neck, I didn't cut this one. I cut this one in half. So the teal's in the front and this green is going all the way around the back. Lots and lots of ways to go. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Be sure to subscribe to my channel. Click that bell so YouTube notifies you when I'm doing something new, and happy sewing. Let's make cute little fabric envelopes. They are the perfect size for gift cards, for cute little notes, carry a bunch of credit cards if you don't want to carry a big old wallet, whatever you want. Now, I love doing them where they have the shape of an envelope. You can also make them where it is straight across, which requires a teeny bit less cutting, but I think it's going to be worth it. I'm going to show you how to do it. And then also these stitch lines that really give that envelope feel. So let's first look at the supplies. The way I have designed these mini envelopes, you can make them out of 10-inch fabrics. So if you have 10-inch pre-cuts, you can use 2 of them and you can make 2 envelopes, or you can take 2 pieces of 5 inches by 10-inch fabric to make these. I just thought some of us have these hanging around, so I would make it so that you have something really efficient to use all of this fabric. Next, you're going to need the template, and this is a free template. If you are on my email list, you can go sign up. It'll automatically be emailed to you. If you're not on my email list, you can sign up. You'll need to click a double opt-in confirmation to make sure no one else is signing you up for my email list, and then you will get this. I'm going to be using a lightweight interfacing. I'm a big proponent of using what you have on hand, which is why I am using this featherweight interfacing. You can use whatever you have. You want it to give a little bit of body to your envelope, but you don't want it to be too stiff or too thick. Then you're going to need some pins, a pencil, something to help turn corners. I have this little turning tool. You could use a chopstick. You could use a pencil, whatever you want. I'm going to be using pinking shears to make the stamp. You can close it a few different ways. I'm going to show you how to use the cam snaps because they're fun and I love them. If you don't have them, don't want to get them, you can also just use a little scrap of Velcro to do that closure. You could also do a buttonhole and sew on a button. That's totally up to you. Then you need your basics: ruler, mat, rotary cutter. So let's get started. As I mentioned in the supplies section, you can make 2 envelopes out of 2 10-inch pre-cut pieces of fabric, or you can use scraps of fabric that are each 5 inches wide by 10 inches high. And if you are using directional fabric, you want it to be wide by high, and you need the direction going like this. I'll talk more about direction in a minute. I'm going to show you how to do it with the 10-inch. You'll figure out how to do it with the 5-inch. So you can put your interfacing on the back of either side. I usually put it on whatever fabric I'm going to use for the lining, just because if you don't adhere it perfectly and it gets a little bit wrinkled, you won't see it as much on the inside. But hopefully we're going to do a good job. Now I have this interfacing, and I cut it slightly smaller than 10 inches. Well, you'll see quite a bit smaller than 10 inches, but because this is going to be on the inside, I decided I did not want to run to the store and get more interfacing. I'm just going to piece this together, and no one is ever going to know. So I have put this face down. You can feel the bumps, or sometimes it's shiny depending on what product you're using. You want that next to the back of your fabric because that is what is going to fuse or stick to your fabric. You do not want it to fuse to your iron. Then you're going to read the directions on the back of your product. And this one says to cover with a damp cloth. And I can't find my pressing cloth at the moment, so I'm just going to use 2 pieces of white fabric so I can still kind of see where my square is. And it says to dampen it. So this is just a mister bottle with water. They're really handy for ironing. You can get them on Amazon. I have my iron set to wool, and then it says to press down for 10 seconds to fuse this. So we're just going to hold this down and move across the fabric. Now I'm going to lift and press every time I move. I'm not going to slide the iron like I am ironing a shirt because we don't want that interfacing to slide at all because it really was close to the edge of the fabric and I don't want to all of a sudden fuse it to my ironing board mat. So as you can guess, if you're working with fabric scraps, you would have just cut a piece of interfacing that was 5 inches by 10 inches and adhered it to the back of one of your fabrics because we're using these 10-inch squares. I just did it all at once. So I'm going to put these together. I'm just cutting them in half, so it really doesn't matter if they're right sides together because we're going to be moving them again. Grab my ruler, put that 5-inch line right along the edge. Make sure I have that nice and straight. Cut that in half. And now I have fabrics to make 2 envelopes from those 2 pieces. Well, 3 because I did it before 2. The next step is to cut with our template. And if you didn't get the free template, that's totally fine. You can just cut a point on one end, and then you can cut this shape or you can do straight on the other end. Now, the tricky part and the part that seems kind of weird is if you're going to be using a directional fabric, the point needs to be at the bottom of the fabric, not at the top. See, so the direction's going this way, and we're going to put this down here. If it's just a random toss, it doesn't matter at all which end each of the templates goes on, but let me show you why. It is because when this becomes the outside or the lining, it's going to fold up like this and fold down like this to be the flap. So you want to make sure this flower on the flap is right side up and not upside down. So this is right side up, that's right side up, that's going to be upside down, but we're not going to worry about that. We're keeping this simple. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to place this template, and I'm just doing it on the fabric that does not have the interfacing. Grab a ruler, and I'm going to cut those 2 angles. So the point is cut, and now we need to do the bottom. You can either put it like this and pin it and cut all 3 of those lines, but what I like to do that's a little bit faster and easier is to fold this in half and just finger press that so it's flat. And then I fold my template in half and I put the fold on the fold and the point matching the bottom of the fabric. And then I'm just going to pin that and cut that by hand. Now, if you do have a cutting machine and you like to use your cutting machine for fabric, like a Cricut or a Scan and Cut Silhouette, there is an SVG file that you can get. It is with the written tutorial that you can get on Etsy, or they are free for anyone that is a member of my Sew with Tara Reid membership program, which you can try for $1. So I will put a link below this video so you can see that. You could jump in, grab this, grab that SVG file, see what else is in there and decide if that is for you. But there we go. Now we have that shape. So you can either cut that shape on a cutting machine or just quickly cut that by hand. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put these right sides together, and the orientation doesn't matter because the inside is non-directional. And then I'm going to pin this. Now, a lot of people would cut both of them and then pin them together, but I don't, because you're going to have to do a lot of trimming after you sew these together, and it just saves a step. And then if things aren't matching absolutely perfectly because you've hand cut, it is not going to be a problem. I keep the pins pretty far in, so I'm not going to have to take them off as I'm sewing 1/4 inch from each side. Now, one other tip, and this is great if you're teaching somebody to sew, or I actually still do it all the time myself, is when you have these really deep points, I take a ruler and I draw with pencil where that 1/4 inch is. And I love this ruler because this blue line is exactly 1/4 inch. So it is really quick and easy to get that lined up. I get the inside of the blue lined up with the edge of the fabric. And so I just do a few of these lines where I know I'm going to need to pivot. And you could do this before you put the pins in. Might be a little bit easier, but I didn't. I forgot. So you don't have to do it all the way around, just where you're going to be pivoting your needle while you're sewing. This is really, really helpful when you're teaching people to sew, teaching kids to sew. It gives them a lot more confidence to know what they're doing, because even experienced sewists, sometimes when you get to weird points like this, you think you know where you need to turn, you lift your needle, you pivot, and you realize you're a little further than a 1/4 inch. And so you have to put it down, go back again, which isn't a huge deal, but it can be a cause of stress for people who are new. So when I was teaching my niece, she really liked doing this when we did a project. So it takes, a minute or two to just draw those lines. And now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch. And we're going to leave a few inches open on this straight side down towards the point, but not too close, because we want to be able to turn that nicely. So there and there. So now we're going to head to the sewing machine. Even though my machine will do a knot for me, whenever I am sewing at the beginning or at the end, when I know I'm going to be turning something right side out, I always go forward and backward just so that there's a little bit more stability to that section and it's not going to rip open when I'm turning my project. So now you'll see how easy that was, that I could just stop on that line, lift the foot, pivot or turn my fabric, and then I'm going to put the foot back down so that it is lined up with this edge, and we're going to keep on going. Now we're just going to remove these pins and we're going to trim and cut our corners. So I like to cut my corners nice and deep, especially these, because they are so tight. Getting all of this fabric inside this little section is going to make it really hard to turn that corner well. I will say though, that you're not going to get a perfect point, whatever you do. It's going to be a little bit bubbled, but that's okay because it's on the inside. So I clipped those points. And then I'm just going to cut right along where the white fabric is cut. So I'm going to cut that back off, or the lining. Then I'm going to cut those two corners. Now it's also important to trim here so that this is going to turn and give us a nice straight area on the envelope. So what I do is I take my scissors and I cut straight in to each of those pivot points. And then I just cut kind of at an angle on both sides, because that is going to ease up that fabric so that when we turn and press it, it's going to press really nicely. Then we're going to do the same thing up here. I do 2 cuts. Make sure you don't cut your stitching whenever you're cutting corner. So you'll see we had so many cuts to do with the corners that it was just as easy, actually easier and faster, to cut the rest of this lining off now instead of cutting it into the shape. So next we just need to turn this right side out, and you want to get it as right side out as possible with your fingers before you use a turning tool. So I always rub my finger along the seams, just kind of press that out as best I can. These bottom corners obviously are going to need a bit of help. I'm going to grab my turning tool. And again, if you don't have one, you can use the tip of a pen. Make sure the pen isn't open because you don't want to draw on your fabric. You could use a chopstick, something that has a point but isn't super pointy, because you don't want it to poke through, especially since we cut pretty close to those seams. Even if I really jabbed this hard, I could poke this through, which would be a bummer. We'd be starting over. Going to use my quilter's clapper. This is just a piece of wood, really easy to hold. It's unfinished. After you press this down. It takes the heat out of the fabric and also gives you a better crease than if you don't use one. I also love it because when you're steaming cotton, especially when you're on a smaller ironing board like this that is metal, this fabric gets really hot. So I like to do this not only for how well it helps press that, but it also makes it less hot for my fingers. Then here where we turned it, you just want to have that tucked under with the same seam allowance. So when we're done, nobody's going to know which side you turned. I'm going to use this for the outside, this for the inside. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this down and press that flap. Now you'll notice on the template, it has a line. So you can use that. You're just going to kind of put this up a little bit, like with the seam allowance, right? Because it's still a little bit wider. So you can do it this way. Put your ruler here, move that. You want it about a 1/2 inch down. And then you can fold that, move your ruler, do not iron on an acrylic ruler, and press. Or I was doing that on a different video and somebody told me about this cool product because we all learn about things at different times, right? So she told me about the Clover Hot Ruler and you can iron right on it. So what I do is I put this down and I make sure this line is even on the edges. This point is at that 1/2 inch. And then I can leave this here. I can press on there and do that. It's really cool. I like it for projects like this, but it's really, really handy for bigger projects where maybe you're doing a long strip of fabric and you need it folded down a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch. It's a fun little tool to have in your arsenal. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now we're gonna unfold that and you can see that crease. We're just going to fold this up and put these points to the crease and press. So now we have our shape, and if you just wanted it to be plain and you didn't want a stamp or an address or anything on the back, you would be good to go to sew this together. But we're going to do the whole shebang, so I'm going to show you how to do the stamp and the address piece next. We'll use this as an example. So for the stamp, I cut a 1-inch piece out of fabric, and I usually try and have something that I like in the center. This was cut out of this bottom section, so this is going to work really well. I'm just going to take that and I'm going to fussy cut it, which basically means I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line that sunflower up inside a 1-inch square. And it's a little bit bigger than 1 inch, so I can either cut some of the petals off on either side, or I could off-center it like that and be artsy. I'm just going to kind of make it the whole center. So I'm just going to turn it and cut all 4 sides, making sure I'm lining it up so that it's going to be about a 1-inch square when we're done. So this is going to be the center of my stamp. So if you have white, I would use a color instead of white for this outer stamp section. So just go into your scrap fabrics. I happen to have the same fabric, and you're going to want a piece that is, or at least a 1/4 inch larger than your stamp all the way around. I'm just going to cut this really quickly and make it an odd shape and show you how it really doesn't matter, because when we make it into a stamp, it's going to be perfect. So we're going to sew that onto that. But before we do that, we're going to get our dress section ready. And I'm going to use this yellow again. So I'll have this stamp. Oh, it's going to be interesting. I've never done this in color. So I like to make this 1 inch high and about 2.5 inches long. So this is 2 1/4. That's just what it is. So that's going to be totally fine. So that stamp will be up there. This will be here. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. You can do it with stitching, and I'm going to show you that. Or another way is to use heat transfer vinyl if you have a cutting machine. And that's how I did this. So you would basically take your Cricut, Scan and Cut, Silhouette, whatever you have. You could do a name. You could say for you, whatever you want to do. You would iron that onto that piece of fabric and then sew that onto the envelope. So that's an option, but I'm going to show you the sewing method. So because I want this to be jiggly lines, I actually don't want that on the inside of the envelope. So I am going to sew that before I put it onto the envelope. It's a little harder because this is just one piece of fabric. It's so flexible. So you could either starch that to make it a little bit stiffer, or I am just going to put a little scrap of interfacing on the back to give it a little bit of body and help it to hold its shape while we stitch. Okay, so now we are going to go to the sewing machine. Now I'm just going to quickly sew all 4 sides of this little sunflower stamp image to the gold backing. And I am using a smaller stitch length. I'm using a 1.9, and I'm going to not go all the way to the edge. And the reason I'm using a smaller stitch length is I want to be able to fray that edge because I think it just gives a little fun look to my stamp. So you want to try and be a little more equal distant from the edge. This one is a little bit higher than the rest, but we're just going to wing it. And then I'm just going to take tweezers and I'm just going to pull some of these threads out. You can do it all the way around. Primitive little frayed look to it. And then it looks purposeful and not like a couple threads are coming out if you don't do it. See, it gives kind of a fun look. And then we'll cut the yellow in a minute. But first, we are going to just sew our address onto our label. And I usually just do 2. You always want to do a contrasting color fabric. If I did black, it would show up a lot more, but I'm just going to do white and see how that looks. And again, I'm using a small stitch length so that we can curve this a little bit more in this short distance. But before we sew these down, we need to trim our stamp. And I'm just going to do that right here so it's easy. So I keep little bowls by my sewing machine for threads. So I'm going to put that down so that I don't end up getting a bunch of little threads into my sewing machine since I've decided to do this right here. So I'm just going to take the pinking shears and I'm going to cut all 4 sides so that it really looks like a stamp and not just a square on a square. So there's our stamp. I do have links to all of the products below the video if there's anything that you decide, oh, I like that and I want that. So now I'm just going to place this stamp and I'm going to sew this on. Now, this time I am going to pull up the bobbin thread, which means I'm going to put the needle down while holding this thread, lift the needle, give a little tug, grab my tweezers. And I always use tweezers because if I use my fingers, I end up stabbing my finger a lot with that sharp needle. Put both threads under the foot, and then I'm going to hold that as I start. That is going to avoid having one of those little bird nest knots created underneath your fabric. Now I'm going to place the address. So I'm just going to do the same thing, sew that on there. The next thing we need to do is draw the lines that we are going to sew to make it look like paper folded for an envelope. And you can do this a couple ways. You can use a pencil, you can use a heat erasable pen, you could even just put a little piece of tape as a guideline. I'm going to throw caution to the wind and I'm going to use one of these Frixion pens. They are supposedly not designed for fabric, even though they will go away with heat, but they might come back if the fabric gets too cold. I used them a lot for a while, then I learned that little fact. My Madam's so dried up and I don't have a replacement, so we are going to throw caution to the wind because it's an envelope, for goodness sake. I don't think it's an heirloom thing that's going to be sticking around so long. So I have drawn the lines on those. Now, before I have always done colored outside. So I've always used white so that it shows up really nicely, like on this one. But because we're doing a white outside, I'm going to change my thread and I'm going to do gold because I want it to show up. So I'm just going to do a contrasting color to my fabric. Now I'm going to sew the paper lines. I'm going to raise the bobbin thread and grab a hold of that so there won't be a big knot underneath because that will be inside my envelope. Then you just want to trim off those threads. And now we're going to sew the envelope closed. If you do Velcro, you need to put the Velcro on before you sew the pocket together because it's really hard to sew that on when this is already together. But because Velcro is so flat, you can sew all the way around once the Velcro is on. So I'll just walk you through how you would do Velcro if that is your choice. Okay, so if we were going to do Velcro, you would sew the soft, or hook and loop, you would sew the soft side on the inside of the flap. Then you would fold this up, you would put this down, fold it up like this to figure out exactly where the other side of the Velcro needs to go so that those two are going to match. Then you would open this back up and sew that on. That's if you're going to do Velcro. Then you would sew it all together. But I want to do a snap because they're super cute. So I am going to sew this together and then we're going to do the snap. I'm going to show you that that can work. And because this is folded, it's basically 4 layers of fabric when you get those seam allowances in there. You can see that my presser foot is really tilted. It's tilting up and flat on the back. To make it more even and move better when it gets started, I'm going to use leader fabrics. This is basically pieces of folded up fabric. And just squeeze these fabrics back under and put the presser foot down. Now the presser foot is flat and the feet have more to grab onto to get started. It just makes for smoother sewing. You don't have to do it. It's just something I wanted to share with you. So I'm just going to sew all the way around about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And doing this sewing is not only going to be sewing the pocket, but it is also going to sew this area shut where we turned this right side out. To finish this envelope up, we're going to add a snap to close it. And as I've mentioned before, these are called cam snaps. They are plastic snaps. They come in all kinds of colors, made in the USA, family-owned business. I love them. Haven't met the people, but I love the product and I love that it's a US-based company. I have a lot of different colors which are the circles, just like this. So it's just a circle snap. They also make cute little hearts and stars, and I don't know if they have any other shapes, but for this one, I'm just going to do a dot because I don't know. I liked the heart on the pink for Valentine's Day, but we're going to do a circle on this one, and I chose to use the gold. So what you need are 2 of these pointy pieces, and then you need female part is the innie, and the male part is the outie. You can think of it as a belly button. a 1/2 inch down from this point so that your snap is centered. But I want to show you how to really figure that out instead of just measuring, because sometimes maybe you stitched a little further from the edge. The main thing is you don't want this circle to be on this seam allowance where it's a little bit thicker. So you want to kind of feel in your fabric for how far up it needs to be so that it's going to be nice and flat and not tilted. So I'm going to say right there, which is a little bit more than that 1/2 inch. Not much, but a teeny bit. So I just put that there and then put the awl, which is like an ice pick for fabric. Be very careful, it just pokes a hole in there. Then you're going to put the circle side with the point through the fabric on the outside. You're going to just use your fingers and push down, make sure the fabric is down. And then you're going to take the female side, or the outie belly button side, and put that on top. Now you're going to grab the press to put these on. The circular part is going to sit right in the divot of this black area. And then the outie or innie is going to sit on this white plastic part. So you're going to get that in there. And then I always just kind of turn it and investigate and make sure it's centered in there before I squeeze. Now, when I squeeze, what is happening is this is flattening the plastic point inside this piece so that that piece is connected and going to stay on there. So that's great. We have the outside. Now, how do we decide where to put this one? It's very simple. You take the snap, you fold it down, and you press. See how that leaves a circular mark right there? Outie snap part leaves a mark. You're going to take the awl and you're going to poke a hole in the center of that circle, being really careful just to go a little bit in. Don't go through the front of your envelope. Make your hole. This time you're going to take the circle piece and you're going to go from the inside of the envelope, put it in there, press it down, put the other half on, and you're just going to repeat the process with this press to secure this half of the snap. And that is it. It's done. Look at how cute. So here are some examples. This one I just did a stamp. I didn't do the address part. This one I used my Cricut and used heat transfer vinyl. This one has a Velcro close and it has a sewn address, kind of like this one, and the stamp. You can definitely see that more because I used a darker thread than on this one. You just experiment as you go. And now these are ready to use. And remember, you can get the free template by signing up for my email, and that gives you the shape to cut here and this top point. If you're already on my email list, just fill out the form from the link and it'll get sent right to you. If you've never opted in before, you'll have an opt-in email and then you will get it sent right to you. Today, I'm obsessed with key fobs and I want to show you how quick and easy they are to make. They're great for using scraps as long as you have some of the hardware hanging around, and they're wonderful gifts. Stocking stuffers, teacher's gifts, hostess gifts, just because you felt like making them and don't want to have 50 in your house gifts. So let me show you how you can make these in 5 to 10 minutes. No joke. So here are the 3 common sizes that are created for key fobs. The first 2 are wristlets. This one is about 14 inches long. It's going to be a lot easier to put onto your wrist. Easy on, easy off. This is by far the most popular, which is a 10 inch. You can still get it on. It's not going to be as easy if you have larger hands, but it's also not going to take up as much room in your purse. And then this one is called a zipper pull, or it could just be a small keychain that takes up even less room wherever you're carrying your keys. Or you can also hook this to like a suitcase and have an easy way to see which luggage is yours. So now let's take a look at how easy it is to make. So what do you need to make these key fobs? If you want to have a different fabric on the inside and the outside to give it a little more character, you need 2 pieces of fabric and 1 piece of fusible fleece. And the dimensions will be on my blog at tarareed.com for the 3 different sizes that I showed you. If you want it to sew up even faster, you're going to use 1 piece of fabric so the outside and the inside will match, and again 1 piece of fusible fleece. Then you need the key fob hardware, which is basically this, and it has teeth on one side. You're going to clamp that together with a key fob tool. It has the rubber. It's the perfect width for this piece. So while some people use needle nose pliers and then put fabric around it so it doesn't dent your hardware,
Most of these are sold in kits with this tool. So if you're going to make a few of these, I highly recommend you just go for it and get the tool, because you're going to get easier and better results, and they're not that expensive. The first thing you're going to do if you're using two different fabrics is you're going to sew the two pieces together along a long edge with a 1/4 inch seam and then press that seam open. You'll then take your fusible fleece, which is the same length as your key fob but not the same width, and center it over that seam, and then follow the manufacturer's instructions to adhere that fleece in place. I'm gonna move that aside. Now, if we're using just one, where the inside and the outside are gonna be the same, you skip a step. You don't have to sew anything or open any seams. You're simply going to layer the fleece and the fabric and adhere that fleece. Now, the next step is going to be the same for both. You're just going to simply fold your fabric right up against the fleece and press. You're going to do that on both sides. And we'll do that on the small one. I'm showing you the kind of the zipper pull size for the one fabric, and then the 10-inch, the medium, more popular size for the other one. All right, doing both at the same time, giving that time to cool off before I have to touch it again. Now you're going to fold this in half, which is basically folding it on the seam, and press. And because it is so thick, when you press it, it is pressing that seam, but it doesn't keep it down. So you can clip it or pin it, or you can simply take it to your sewing machine. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to sew 1/8 of an inch from the edge all the way around and then down the middle. So for the one fabric, you're simply going to fold it in half. There's no seam to be folding it. You're just going to match the outside edges and press that in place. Back from the sewing machine. This is so simple, I decided you did not need to actually watch me at the sewing machine. So I took the pressed piece that was folded over and I just sewed around the edges, and then I did another row down the middle, just keeps it a little bit more secure. And you can play with your thread colors. This one I did white, so it really shows. On the other side I did blue, so you're really not seeing your stitching. So you can decide if you want your stitching to be an accent. You could do a fun design down the middle or anything depending on what fabric you use. So you start that way, and you'll notice that the edges are a little bit scruffy. So this one, I've done the next step, which is to just fold it in half and sew the end. Now, I did trim that so that it's going to be nice and tight against our hardware, and you're not going to have threads hanging out the side. So it's literally just fold it in half, sew across there. You need to sew across there because with this hardware, there's only a clip that digs into the fabric on one side. So you wouldn't want the other side of the fabric to somehow slip if you didn't clamp that tight enough. So now, move that so it's not in the way. You're just going to place that inside the hook, or the fob hardware, whatever you want to call it. And don't really push down too hard. You don't want one of those hooks coming into your thumb, but you'll see it's the exact width of your fabric. And then after some trial and error, this is the best way I have found to do this. So I come in from the side and I squeeze it closed slightly. Then I come in from the end, and you'll see that the tool is the perfect size to close this fob. It's designed, and this is a 1-inch fob. You want to make sure that your key ring is not hooked under that. And then you're simply going to give it a little muscle, squeeze it a few times, check both sides, make sure that it looks nice and clamped, and it's done. That's it. Completely done, super fast.
Stock up on your 3/4 inch elastic, grab your extra 2.5 inch pre-cut strips, or you can of course cut your own 2.5 inch wide strips. I'm also going to grab my toolbox that is full of key fob hardware and my brand new key fob pliers. In this video, I'm going to show you how easy it is to make scrunchy elastic key fob wristlets. Now I have become obsessed with scrunchy stuff. If you want to learn how to do scrunchy dog bandanas, check the link in the video description. But in this video, we are going to do scrunchy wristlets. I'm going to show you how to make them out of your 2.5-inch fabric scraps. I'm going to show you how to make them as loose or full as you want them to be, and how quick and easy these are to make. If you can believe it, these are even faster than the other way. So let's get into it. Now, I have to tell you, I am almost too excited about these scrunchy key fobs because I thought the regular key fobs were pretty quick and easy to make. These things, it should almost be illegal. The first thing I'm going to show you is your choices for how scrunchy you want them to be. So all three of these were made by taking 2.5-inch pre-cuts. They come all rolled up in a ball. It's a great way to get lots of fabric. Lots of quilters use them. And then you end up with like a whole bunch left. So I like to look for projects for how to use these. Scrunchy key fobs, perfect solution. This one was made with a half. Took the 2.5-inch strip, I sewed it together, and then I cut it in half, and I put half of it on top of the elastic, spread it out, added the key fob. So that is how scrunchy or full, or, I don't know what word you want to use, how gathered the fabric looks when you use half. So from one strip, I can make two that look like this. Then this one was the first one I did. And so I sewed the entire length, I put it on, and then I just kept pulling until it was kind of the scrunchie that I liked. And then I cut off the end. So for this one, I used 28 inches versus 21 inches on this one. So you can kind of see a difference. It's a little bit fuller, but for the difference, you might want to go with this so that you can make two out of every strip of fabric. Then I thought, well, what is it going to look like if we use the entire strip? So this is what it's going to look like. It's super gathered, and it's just one strip, put it all the way on, and there you go. So there's a definite difference in the look and the gathering doing the entire strip versus half or almost half. Now, another thing to remember when you're choosing your fabrics, don't worry about the direction of the fabric, because I did it first. This yellow one was made with chickens, kind of like this fabric. The print is going from the side, and I thought, well, when I sew it in half and put it on there, how's that going to look? It really doesn't matter because you can't really tell what is on this fabric. It is more the color combinations that you're seeing than the actual design. So that's kind of what you want to look for when you're using your scraps. Now this one, because these quilt blocks are a little bit smaller, you get a better idea of what they are versus the chickens. So just pick something where you like the color combination and you want to make a key fob out of it. So what other supplies do we need? We obviously need our 2.5-inch strips of fabric. These are pre-cuts. Now, if you're not a quilter or you never buy these, that's totally fine. You can cut your own pieces of fabric that are 2.5 inches wide by either 21 inches if you want it to look like this. This one is 2.5 inches wide by the full width of your fabric. So you're not left out if you're not a quilter or you don't have these pre-cuts, but people that have them, they always have extra. So I want to help them figure out how to use them. Then you're going to need the key fob hardware. This is 1-inch key fob hardware. Find the link in the video description to my Amazon storefront. I made a list that is everything you need to make these key fob wristlets. I highly recommend you invest in the pliers. You can use regular pliers, but they're usually not quite as wide. They don't have this silicone protective. You could dent the metal. This is perfectly sized and designed to work with these key fobs. If you're just starting, you can buy a set that has like 50 of these and the pliers included. So definitely worth the investment. Then I'm going to be using my tube turner. You can use whatever combination you want. I've recently had a couple people tell me that they use boba tea straws and a chopstick. So there's lots of different things that you can find that is basically going to be an open tube and then a chopstick. I'll show you how this works. This is from a set of 3 or 4. I can't remember. I believe it was under $10. I use them all the time and they're going to last forever. So great tool investment. and I don't drink boba tea, so I don't have the boba tea straw. And then 3/4 inch wide elastic. So all you need to do is go through your bin and decide what color you want. I'm going to do this color. No matter how full or loose you want them to be, I'll show you how that works, and you are going to be good to go. If you sew and sell, I think this would be a great way to go. You can offer the regular scrunchies where you can see more of the design, and then maybe offer some of these too. I would sell them at the same price. It's just a different look, but these are going to sew up a lot faster, so you're going to have a better profit margin on these. Now let's head to the sewing machine. So I'm taking my 2.5 inch wide strip of fabric. I'm going to fold it in half long ways, right sides together. I don't pin this together. I just fold it as I sew. I also don't worry about cutting off the selvage. I do that at the end. This way I can just grab these strips and just rock and roll, sew a bunch of them together, and then cut them to size and put the key fob hardware on them. So I'm going to sew all the way down this strip, making sure I keep these edges matched, and then I'm going to go straight across at the bottom. Now when I get to the end, I'm going to sew into the selvage band, this white section, because we are going to be cutting this off after we turn it right side out. We will need both ends open when we add the elastic and sew this together, but for turning purposes, we need to sew one end closed. So if you were sewing to sell, you could just sit and sew a bunch of these, and then you could take them and turn them right side out while you're watching TV or waiting for your kids for a doctor's appointment or at a sporting event, anywhere where you can just work with your hand. Now it is time to turn these right side out. I cut them apart. So I'm going to take my tube turner or whatever you're going to be using, find the end that is open, and I'm going to just put that in there and slide it till it gets to the sewn end. Then you're going to take the pointy end of your stick if you're using one of these tools, and you're going to push that in, and you're just going to pull the fabric down. Now, because it is really long, sometimes it gets a little tricky. As you're pulling this fabric down, the stick starts to come out, so just try and keep that up in there. We basically need the stick to absolutely stay in there. So we can see that the stick is there. You can just pull it really quickly, because it doesn't matter where that is as long as our stick is up here. And this is more important that the stick be up here when you're doing something where you're going to keep that sewn edge. But because we don't want to lose too much of the length, we do want to just use that point to push that out a little bit. Now I'm just going to push the stick back out. Well, to be honest, I usually just stand up, hold it above my head, and that falls right down on the ground, but I can't do that over my workspace. Then I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to trim the end. We don't need that anymore. That was just used to get it turned right side out. So now I'm just going to really quickly do the second one. Now I have some very exciting news. I hope you find this as exciting as I found it. The first two that I did, I was just so used to having to press these things open, right? If you're doing bag straps or anything, honestly, you're like, okay, now I need to press it open. And so I went and used my iron. And then when I was doing the third one, I thought, why am I doing that? Do I actually need to press it? Because I'm going to make it all scrunchy. So I thought, nope, I'm not going to press this one, and I'm just going to try putting it on the elastic without pressing. And guess what? It looked exactly the same. So no ironing for this project. That saves a ton of time. My favorite size key fob uses an 11-inch or a piece of elastic. So I'm just going to cut 2 pieces that are 11 inches. So we are ready to go. And we're going to do these 2 ways. So this one, I'm going to make 2 that are less scrunchy. So I'm going to trim the sewn end off, just like I did with the last one. And then I'm going to trim that selvage part off. You don't have to be super, super straight, be pretty straight, but this part is going to be inside the key fob hardware. So if I want to do half, I'm just going to match these ends, pull that in half, and cut. Now I'm taking a big safety pin. You can use any size. This is a quilting size safety pin, and I like them because you can just move it a little bit faster. We're not ironing, but when you put it in, what I like to do is make the seam that we sewed centered on the elastic. I don't want it spinning all around. I don't want it too close to the edge. I want it centered so that we can then have it on the inside of the wristlet. And you can always twist it as you go if it doesn't stay super well. Don't stress about it. Don't spend a ton of time on it. But that's the goal. See, it got a little crooked, so I can just do that and get that seam lined back up. Now we're going to put this through until the end of our fabric is lined up with the end of the elastic. And now we're going to go back to the sewing machine. So with our elastic evened up with the edge of the fabric, we are going to sew forward, back, and forward about 1/8 of an inch from the edge just to secure the elastic with the fabric. And that will all be under the key fob hardware. And now I'm going to go back to my overhead shot and show you. So that is now secure. So we're going to keep pushing the fabric until we get the other end of the elastic lined up with the other end of the fabric. Now you want to keep this scrunchy part towards the center. Don't push it all the way down here. We need this to be nice and flat until we get the hardware on. Then we're going to spread it out. Don't spread it out before you put the hardware on. You want it kind of all scrunched in the center of your elastic. Okay, take that safety pin off. Now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and attach that in the same way. So now we have it sewn on both ends. I am going to trim these ends to make sure they're straight, make sure there's not a bunch of threads. We want to get all of these threads off of here. We're going to match these edges. I'm going to go back to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew those together one more time just to make sure one part isn't going to slip out and that this is going to be a set. Okay, now I feel good about that. It's going to stay together. It's not going to move or get unaligned when I am putting it in the hardware. Now, there's some different ways to do this. You can put it on the fabric, then get your hardware on there and squeeze. Some people take this keychain off because they find then it doesn't get in the way. I don't like doing that because I often break my nails when I do that, and it's just an extra step. So I like to put the key fob in my pliers and I line it up with the top edge. And I make sure the points are on the bottom. And you can see this is out of the way. It's not going to bother me. Then I'm going to put the fabric inside and I'm going to double check each side to make sure the fabric isn't poking over one side or the other of the hardware. And then I'm going to squeeze. Now you'll see it still feels like there is a bit of a gap. And I have that problem mostly with the elastic version, not as much with the fusible fleece version because that's more pliable. So then what I do is I come back and I squeeze each side again. So you can see that is a little bit tighter on this side than on this side. The last thing you need to do is just push the fabric so that it's evenly scrunched, gathered. I don't know, what word would you use for this? So it's spread out evenly and looks super cute. That was so fast. So let's do this one and we'll do the entire one. So we'll do the half fabric and we'll do the full fabric to really see the difference between the two. One thing that I love about key fobs is I just don't think you can have too many, right? They're kind of an accessory. So this makes a great stocking stuffer, a great gift for teachers, for service providers, like if you get your nails done or your hair done and you just want to make them something a little bit special. People can have multiple keychains. They could have a summer one, a holiday one, fall, winter. I mean, you could just keep moving your keys based on the season, or even if they have enough, they could change their key fob based on the color that they're wearing. Totally up to them. So let me know in the comments while I do this scrunching who you might make these for. Now, if you wanted to add a tag to your scrunchies, maybe just, for branding, if you're sewing and selling, or just so people know that you made it, this is a 1-inch tag that I had made years ago, woven, and I'm just going to put it on the inside and then fold that over. And I'm going to make sure that we're going to catch that when we sew that closed. So there's lots of cute tags that you can purchase online. You can make your own. I'm going to do another video about how to make your own tags. But see, now that's going to be on the inside. Next step, grab my pliers, put my hardware in there, put my fabric in, make sure it is lined up, and squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Then I'm going to do my extra squeeze on each side. So it's almost done, but you can see now it looks like a heart. It's kind of weird because we need to get this fabric evened out. Half a piece, a full piece. And then I want to show you again the fabric that these started with. So this one is from my spring barn fabric, and you can see little pieces of it, but you can't really tell what it is. It's more just kind of colors along there. And then this one was made from this fabric. You can actually tell that those are the little circle windmills better because it isn't gathered as much and because it is a simpler pattern. But either way, they look great, and it is a great way to use your fabric scraps. So let me know which way you like better, who you're going to be making these for, and happy sewing. All right, so this is what we're going to be doing today. The wristlets, the pattern, this is what it looks like. It's available on Etsy. I'll just show you. Like I take a jillion pictures when I am putting patterns together so you can really see each step. And I try and do photos in almost all of my patterns. Now, moving forward, everything new will have photos and not just diagrams because I think it's easier to see. So in the pattern, it'll show you how to do like this angled or a couple colors. We're just going to do a simple one fabric. It also shows you how to do like a different fabric inside. We're going to do a basic one fabric and either the key, like the key circle, or a lobster clasp. And actually, you guys can vote on that. Let me know in the comments which you want to see. They go together basically the same, but I'll make whichever one you like the best. So throw that in the chat, please. You want me to do this one or this one? So this is our goal. So let's look at what we need. These are our supplies. We're going to need pins. I'm also going to use clips. I found my tweezers. I have lost those. I need them at my sewing machine. I'll show you why later. Then for the fabric, you need, I'm going to do the larger one. So I'm going to do this size. This is kind of a common size for the key fob ones, but when you do it without the hardware, where's my hardware one go? Okay, so when you do it, now you can't even see, hold on. So when you do the key fob hardware, it only covers like a ½ an inch of the ends of your fabric. But when you do this, you lose a ¼ inch in a seam allowance, and then you have to sew a little bit further back to put the, to sew this in place. So you're losing a lot more of the length of what's going on. And so I gave this one to a friend, and she has bigger hands than me, and she didn't like the size. She said it was too hard to get on and off. She much preferred this size. So we're going to do this bigger size because it is a little bit easier just to kind of hold like that. Okay, back to my supplies. And I'm trying to keep it, I put pins on the edge of my ironing board so I can kind of see what is going to be showing for anyone watching vertically. Let me know in the chat if you're watching vertically. All right, we have 1 vote for keychain ring, 1 vote for lobster clasp. We need more votes because now I don't know what to do. Okay, fabric, you need 1 piece of fabric that is 3½ inches by 14 inches. And that's if you're using a solid or a non-directional fabric. If you're using directional fabric, it's a little bit trickier if you want it to be right side up on both sides. Basically, you need 2 pieces of fabric and you would stitch them together so that they're both going in this direction. And that way, when you turn it over, everything's not going to look upside down. Hopefully that makes sense. Then you need a piece of fusible fleece that is 2 inches by 13½ inches, and that looks too wide, doesn't it? Uh-oh. No, that's 2 inches. That's not wide enough. Great. Fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna have to cut a piece of fabric. I really thought I prepped this better. I know I often use the Pellon fusible fleece, but Today I'm going to try the Heat and Bond fusible interfacing. Feels very similar. I think it's going to work really well. And then I have the lobster clasps. I love this little set I got on Amazon because it has all different colors. So it's kind of fun. This little rose colored one goes really well with that fabric. These are not my fabrics. The finished ones aren't my fabrics. This yellow is, but now we need to punt real quick, and I need to get a cutting mat up here because I did not cut the right size. Okay, we're gonna do this one because it's basically flat. Keychain, oh boy. Okay, once I get this all cut and ready, I will tally up. Well, when we get to that step, I'll tally up the votes. All right, I have this little portable, this thing's pretty cool. I think I got it at Walmart's from June Taylor. So you can cut on the one side, and then you can iron on the other side, which, you know what, we can just use that. Now I like this because you can see better. But it's kind of cool if you ever travel or, you know, go to retreats and things like that. So I'm going to get this to the correct size, which is 3.5. Sorry about this. I usually try and have this part done, but we could talk about cutting with rulers. So I always put my hand flat when I cut, and I put my pinky and sometimes my ring finger kind of gripping the side to help it not slide as I'm cutting. Some people also use a weight, like a 5 or a 10 pound dumbbell, barbell, what do you call that? And they put it on there because that puts enough weight on there that it's not going to slide. I would show you how to use that, but it's currently on this cart that has my camera by my sewing machine, and it would tip over if I took it. So you could do that. Then you just want to line this up with the 3.5 inch, hold that flat. And then another thing that sometimes people have issues with is you kind of tilt your rotary cutter, and then you're more likely to go off course. So whenever I'm doing this, I always just double check that I have everything straight up and down and not tilted. All right, so we have the right width now. Let's see where my length's at. I think it's too long. Okay, so 3.5 by 14. At least this was a nice quick fix. Excuse my head. I need to make sure I'm going straight. Okay. Yeah, these are great. And it was also great in a pinch because I don't have my cutting mat down because I was like, oh, I'm not even going to cut anything. I'll just have the ironing space down. So I turned my iron on, which I need to get on my ironing board. I like to use this little travel size. It's like, they call it a project iron because it's not too big and too much steam for me when I'm doing live. So you'll see this one a lot. I also have the bigger one too when we're doing bigger ironing. So we're going to take this, we're going to put it wrong side up. I'm going to find my fleece. Oh, here it is. Okay. Now, if you haven't used fusible fleece before, we're using one-sided, you just kind of feel it. It's scratchy on this side and smooth on this side. The scratchy side has the fusible material. So you do not want that facing up, or you're going to fuse it to your iron and be very messy and unhappy. So you want to make sure the fusible side is towards your fabric. And then I like to just center it, and it should be 1/4 inch on each end of fabric beyond the fleece. Then we are just going to fold the fabric over the edge and iron. Now when you're actually doing the fusing, they recommend you iron from the other side so that it's just fabric between the, the fusible section and the fleece. But for a project like this, I do it this way because we're going to be hitting it a couple times, so it's going to fuse no problem. Now, if you want to, you can also use a clapper. It's a favorite tool of quilters and me. I just like it. So what this does, it's an unfinished piece of hard wood, and when you iron, you press down on it and it absorbs some of the heat, so then the fabric isn't going to be hot to the touch because it can get pretty hot. And it also helps make that creasier, my technical term. Now we're just going to do the other side. Put one of these up here so you can see. You can use it for a little ID badge. Okay, that's actually a luggage tag, but it looks cute like it's an ID badge. All right, do that. Okay, looks like lobster clasps are winning just from a glance. So now we have that, and now we are going to fold it in half again. And this is going to give us the correct thickness, which is 1 inch, because we're going to use 1 inch lobster clasp, or the keychains, the 1 inch fits really well. Hit it again. And we're matching these edges. So this is going to be getting all those raw edges on the inside. It's going to be nice and padded. Ooh, that's hot. My little clips. Isn't that a cute little bin? I have a pattern for, I call them boxy bins, and it's a set of 5. They kind of nest. I love using them. I use 2 different sizes for clips, actually. When I just need a couple, I like that little baby one. I also keep eye drops in there. They're cute little bins to little fabric baskets. They'd be really cute for gifts too. Like one of the bigger ones would be great if you're doing like a manicure gift. Put little like nail polish and nail files and stuff in there. Okay, now I'm just going to put a clip in the center. Trying to make sure I'm staying centered from my vertical people. Okay. Now what we need to do, and I've tested this a few times because let me show you our end goal. We're going to sew part of this together, and then we're going to put, I think, the lobster clasp, I'll count it up, on here, and then we have to basically open it up and sew this together. So I made quite a few of these, and I kept testing, like, how far do I need to leave open so that that isn't a complete and utter nightmare? And the answer is 3 inches. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a ruler. I have so many rulers. Is anyone else like a ruler collector? And I'm just going to measure 3 inches, and I'm going to put a clip so that the edge towards the center is at the 3 inches. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, so you see what I mean? The clip is basically between the 2.5 and 3 inch mark, and this edge is at the 3 inch mark. So we're going to sew from here to here, not up here, not over here, just here to here. So we're going to switch cameras and head to the sewing machine. Wake it up. Okay, now, because you could also make a little mark, like with a pen, or heat erasable pen or pencil, but I like to use the clips because they're not going to leave any kind of mark, because this is all going to be showing on your keychain. This will be, one side will be the outside, one side will be the inside. So because both sides are going to be showing, we want to make sure we don't end up with a crazy bird's nest. Like, see how we have a big old knot there? And that's because I just rocked and rolled and didn't worry about pulling up my bobbin thread. But we don't want that on our keychain. So I'm going to show you how to pull up the bobbin thread. If you haven't done it before, you're going to get your thread on top of your presser foot. So don't have it underneath, have it on top. Then I'm going to just use my finger so I know where that spot is. This is a 1/4 inch foot. So when I have the edge of my fabric at the edge of it, I know I'm a 1/4 inch from the edge, which actually I don't want to be a 1/4 inch. I want to be about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to look at my needle plate. I'm going to put my foot down. Actually, here, let's do this other little trick too. I'm going to grab washi tape. Sometimes I use painter's tape too, but this was right in my drawer. And if you're a crafter or card maker or planner user, you'll know what this is. It's just very thin, low tack tape. So it's not going to leave residue on your sewing machine if you decide to use it as a guideline, which is what we're going to do. I'm going to make sure I have that straight. 1/8 inch. When you're using tape as a guideline, it's key to have it straight or you're not going to do yourself any favors. But anyway, this gives us a nice visual to make sure the edge of the fabric is going on the edge of that tape so that we're going to be about 1/8 of an inch. I can also just look, oh no, what happened? Why are you, did we lose my feed? My screen went out. Okay, maybe it just put itself to sleep. Whew. Panic, panic. And I can't see my chat very well when I'm sewing, so I will double check it when I'm back. Okay, I gotta put that up because my thread got stuck. Okay, back to pulling up the bobbin thread. So you're going to hold the bobbin thread in your hand, foot down, and then you're going to put your needle down. I have a button that does it, I'm spoiled. And then pull it up while still holding this thread. So do it however your sewing machine works. If you use the hand tool turner on the side or however it works. Then I always keep tweezers at my sewing machine. And because sometimes, especially the first time you pull up a bobbin thread, it's really short. So if you go in there with your fingers, you're going to end up really poking yourself a lot, which is not fun. So I always use tweezers. Then you can just pull that up. Then I put both threads in my hand. Use my tweezers to push them down, so it's really easy to get them behind, under and behind the foot. So now I'm holding it pretty tightly, and I'm going to take like 2 or 3 stitches, still holding, and then I'm going to go back 2 or 3 to lock in those stitches. I'm not sure why I'm going so slow. I need to move my foot. And now we're just going to sew to the other end. By holding this for your first few stitches, you're not going to end up with that bird's nest, which I'll show you. And get this done. Uh-oh, my tape's moving. I shouldn't have put it on up that edge. Okay, so now I just want to sew right to that. And when in doubt, leave a little more than 3 inches open versus less than 3 inches. I'll show you why in a second. And then we're just going to knot that. Cut that, then cut both of those threads off there. And then see, looks perfect on both ends. No ugly knots. All right, back to our workspace. Now I need to look at the results of our poll. Anybody count these? I don't want to waste a lot of time counting, but it looks like lobster clasp for the win. I'll show you how both work, and it's not rocket science. Okay. So whichever you use, let's see. I'll do gold. I don't know, is that too much yellow? Do you like it? I think I like it. I usually don't do that. Yeah, I like that better. A little different. So whichever one you use, you're going to put it on and you're going to pull it to the center. Doesn't matter where, it just needs to be over top of the stitching. And then you're going to fold to match these edges and match both of the sides. And then what you're going to do is you're going to open up the ends. So see how I did that? You want to make sure, the reason you want to fold it first before you open anything up is because you want to make sure you don't twist it by mistake and then end up with a twisted keychain, because that wouldn't be the best. So you fold it like this, make sure it's a loop, no twists. Then open and open. I'm trying to do this slow so you can see it. And then I like to use pins for this part because it's a little less bulky. even though I usually love clips. Then I'm going to put a pin right at that center fold. So, and then I'm going to open again. So these are the little sides that we did first. I'm going to pin again right on that fold line. And then I also like to put a pin down here, about an inch down, because it helps, if you put a pin there, it helps keep this part flat so it's not pulling. And this is why we needed so much space open, because if you try to do this with only an inch or two, it gets really, really hard, and it gets even harder when you take it to the sewing machine. Because it's really getting a lot wider than how it's folded together. Does that make sense? Let me know in the chat if you're not tracking this, if I'm not explaining this well. Okay, so we have those ends together, and this is basically what you need to do if you don't want to use key fob hardware. Okay, so we're going to go back to the sewing machine, and we're going to sew straight across with a 1/4 inch seam. Just hearing about it. So thread under the foot. This is my leader fabric, just a scrap piece of fabric. I'm not going to use this much longer because it's getting a lot of threads. I'm going to start on the leader fabric and just sew to the edge. Then any knot is going to be on there. And I'm going to line that up, making sure that corner is correct. So a few stitches on, and then make sure you back stitch. And we're going to sew across with our 1/4 inch seam, just like I never did it before. Oh, I don't know if you saw that, but this was folded under, and that wouldn't have worked very well. So I'm glad I double checked and saw that. Okay, now we are back on the same page and you've seen it all. Sorry, again. Yeah, I one time had somebody not so nicely tell me that I should never do lives because I'm too distracted, I'm all over the place, and it's awful. And then she followed it up with, absolutely no one on YouTube should be doing lives because she has yet to see anyone that can do it well. And I thought, and I actually responded, I said, well, it's just a different format. Like, some people like lives because they like to interact with the people and be able to ask questions, and like it's a community thing. And obviously it wasn't something that she liked. And I just wonder, like, does she just go around leaving nasty comments to everybody putting themselves out there doing this? We make mistakes, people, we're human. Okay, so what I did while talking about her was press that seam open, and then we just have to get it refolded. So since that's a bit wrinkly, we'll just repress that because we don't want it to be lumpy. That got a little bit extra because I had to undo it. All right, so I'm going to just fold it in there, make sure it's going to be nice and flat. Line that seam up. And I'm going to give that a little press. Now it's hot. Now I'm just going to use my clips. Clip that closed. And I just need to know like where, basically where we have to sew. So we had already sewn over half of it, right? So we sewed from there to there. Our last lobster clasp is here. So now we're going to go back. I'm going to make sure I switch the camera, I promise. We're going to pull up the bobbin thread again because we're going to be seeing both sides, and we're going to sew this whole area closed. So we're going to basically connect our beginning and end of our other stitching. So let's do that. And then after that, we're going to sew all the way around on the other side. Okay, camera 2, sewing machine. Check, check. Now I have kind of an industrial, well, not kind of, I have an industrial sewing machine. So I can't take the arm off and like loop this around. So whenever I'm doing bags and things like that, you'll see me kind of, it looks like I'm sewing from the inside. Just do whatever is easiest on your sewing machine. If you can take the, I'm going to pull up the bobbin thread again. If you can take your arm off and have it spin around, do that. If you can't, you can do this. Either way works. All right, so I'm holding my threads. Get that lined up better. Couple stitches back, a couple more stitches. Now I can let go of that thread, and we're just gonna sew along there. Get that lined up better. Whoops, sorry, hit my cord to my camera. Okay, so I'm going to just trim those threads. Whoop. All my seam ripper threads. So now it's sewn all the way around on the one side, and we're going to do the other side. And then as we do the other side, you're just going to move this, whether you have the key ring or the lobster clasp, you're just going to move it out of the way so that you can sew all the way. And for this, I like to start and stop at the seam, because that is where we're going to put the clasp and fold it and then sew here. So it'll be the least noticeable, if it's noticeable at all. It shouldn't really be very noticeable because you're going to be a pro at pulling up the bobbin thread. Okay. So while I'm doing this, let me know who you would make these for. You're going to make some for yourself, make them for gifts. I think this could be a fun gift for friends, family, teachers, nurses, whoever. You could do seasonal. So you could do, or you could do like a holiday set. Make it a little bit different. Or for yourself, obviously. Never forget yourself. So you can see we're getting close to that. I'm just going to keep pulling it as we go around. What's happening? Once you do videos live long enough, you learn to just like roll with everything, because you can't control it and you can't edit it out. Because I can assure you, on some of my edited videos, there's times where I forget to turn the camera on, or it's blurry and I end up having to film it more than once. Excuse me, but you never know because you don't see it. Okay, so now we have this circle with this thing floating around. So let's get it in place. So I'm just going to move it so that the seam right there is under it. And then I'm going to fold it. And we're just going to go back and forth. I usually go forward, back, forward, and that should be plenty to hold this in place. This looks like it might, this is actually a 3/4 inch lobster clasp. See how it's kind of folding the fabric a little bit? A 1 inch, this would be totally flat and smooth, but either one can work. You just want to make sure you have it organized the way you want it if you're using one that's a little bit smaller. Now, you'll notice that this is really thick, right? Because we have 8 layers of fabric once you count all of everything that got folded, and 2 layers of fusible fleece. So if I were to just go like this and put my foot down, you can see that the foot is really tilted because the back is down here and the front is up here. So what you can do to help make your sewing machine go a little bit better is use these cords I did not organize properly. Is use what are called hump jumpers, because it helps you jump humps or start on humps. So I basically took pieces of fabric, cut them to no specific size. I think made a tube and then folded them in half and zigzagged together. And this is what I actually pin on the back of quilts, and then I hang them up on this, or I use them as hump jumpers and I just layer them so that they can help the back of the presser foot get to the height it needs to be so that it's a little bit straighter. It's easier on your machine and it's going to start a little bit better. And I'm trying to reach one more because this is really fat. Okay, so I just put those back there. You don't sew on that. It's just a space holder, just getting everything held up. So now I'm going to pull up my bobbin thread again. And I usually just make sure that your presser foot isn't going to be on top of your hardware or it's not going to sew as well. So just, that's kind of how I decide how far over from here to sew. All right. So I'm just going to sew straight across because we are going to be going back and forth. That's going to knot everything. And see how these are just sitting back here? And now you can just use them again. Just go forward and cut it. And we'll go back to the workspace so you can see that better. Actually, I'll say hi first. Look, so cute. Well, I have to cut the thread off. Okay, so this is the bigger one. It's the same fabric on the inside and out. Now let's compare. Oh, a different one. So this one I made with the Pellon fusible fleece, and this one I made with the Heat and Bond. And I'm going to say that the Heat and Bond is a little bit puffier, so it gives a softer feel than the Pellon. The Pellon is a little bit flatter. I don't know if you can really see that, but that's what I can tell you from my touch and feel experiment. And you're not looking at me anyway. See, I did it again. Okay. As my great nephew would say, he just turned 3. Sorry about that. He always says it with this really deep voice. But anyway, I was showing you the keychains. This has been quite a day. Thank you for your patience. Okay, so this is the Heat and Bond that we just used. It's a little bit puffier, a little bit thicker than this one. And now I want to show you a couple other things, and then we're going to be done. And I'm going to be really careful about what camera's on. Okay, so now you're looking at my workspace, and you can see the 2 keychains, right? Unplug my iron. No, I don't need any extra heat hanging around me. Okay, hello Central Florida. Okay, so that is how it works. And if you weren't here at the beginning, I do have a written pattern that you can get in my Etsy shop. It's going to be 50% off today and tomorrow, so I think it's like $4.87. And it has all the measurements to do 2 different sizes and tons of pictures. And it talks about like using directional fabric or non-directional fabric and the little hump jumpers, and shows you all the pictures and then shows you lots of different ways to put it together. Now, one other thing I wanted to show you is you could do little add-ons. I hope that's not too glary. I should have picked wood. Can you see that? Do I need to get that off the plate? But basically, like with any kind of a keychain, you could put like somebody, I feel like it's really glary. Hold on, let me just dump this all on here. Like you could put an initial. I got these because I've just been thinking about nurses' appreciation, and I feel like sometimes we get a little bit too literal, like with teachers as well, and we do, oh, world's best nurse. You know, once somebody's been a nurse for a while, they have so much of that, and teachers too, that you could do the same thing differently. So, like, you could make your favorite nurse a keychain, or even a lanyard, which is the same thing but a lot longer, and then you could just put like a cute little nurse-related charm on there. So it's, you know, nurse appreciation, but it's a little more subtle, and it's something that they will use more. You could also get these little tassel things just to add a little decoration, letters. One thing to note, where did I put it? Hello, nursey things, where did you go? Well, I don't know. So they came in a bag. I got them on Amazon, and They're really cute, like little enamel nurse things, but they didn't come with the jump rings. So see how it had, let me zoom in. Okay, so see how like this little scrubs, it has the circle right here, but there's no way to attach it to this. So you need a jump ring. So if you've never done jewelry making before, this is called a jump ring, and it's just a metal circle with a cut in it. So you take 2 pairs of pliers. All right, that breakfast jam, a little shaky, and you twist in either direction to open that up, and then you put whatever you want on there, the letter or this thing, and you can get them in gold or silver. Like I would use silver for these, but these are all gold. And then you put it through your lobster clasp, and then you just do it the opposite and make those ends meet. So now you have a little bit of an up-leveled keychain because it's got something, you know, representative of the person or whatever. So this, I think this is fun for gifts. It's also a great thing to offer. Like if you sell on Etsy, you could offer the keychains and then they could pick the initial that they want on it. You could even do 2. Like we could just add another one and put the initial on there. So it's got like A for Annabelle and then the nurse thing. So I just thought I would share that. It's a great way to just add. You could do it with these key fob hardware ones. You could put them on the keychain as well, like the key ring. So anyway, like that. I recently had someone reach out to me about how to add a D-ring or a loop for a D-ring or a lobster claw to this travel tissue cover. And this is a tutorial you can find for free on my blog. You can buy a printable version of the pattern that has no ads in my Etsy shop. I'm going to show you how to make the box corners, and I'm going to show you how to add a little loop so that you can either add a D-ring or like a D-ring with lobster clasp. Because this is nice if you want to hang it from your water bottle or your purse or whatever to add that loop. So basically we're going to be adding a loop like this so that it would come off of the side. For something this size, I would prefer to have a D-ring that is this size. So 1/2 inch. When you measure D-rings or the D-ring on a clasp, you don't measure the outside, you measure the space in between the metal, right? So what's inside the metal. So this one is basically 1 inch. It's just shy of 1 inch. This one is a 3/4. It's the same size as this. And then this one is 1/2. So I wish I had something like this that was a 1/2 inch, but I don't. So I'm going to make a loop and we're going to put a 1/2 inch lobster clasp on there. Now, why would you use one over the other? It really depends on what you have on the other end. So if you have a clasp on something, then you're going to want a clip, right? So it can hook like that. But say your purse has some clips, then you need a clasp to hang things from. You just need both parts to get it to work. So those are some different sizes. You would do the size based on what your project is. So I really want it to be small because there's not a lot of distance here and I want to keep it on that side. So that said, how big do I need to cut this fabric to make that little loop? The rule of thumb is you take the width that you need, the finished width. So we want this to be 1/2 inch. You multiply by 4 and you add a 1/2 inch. So I'm going to cut this 2.5 inches wide. Then you decide how long you want it to be because this is going to go inside. So you're going to have at least a 1/4 inch in that seam line. This one was made out of a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square. Seems kind of long. I want it to be a little bit shorter. So 2.5 by 2 inches is the size fabric we're going to use for this. This is going to be the exterior fabric, and I cut that to 6.5 by 5.5. The fabric that's going to be on the inside and also going to be this little accent band is going to be this tan water. And this one is cut to 5.5 by 7.5. The 2.5 by 2 inch piece to make our tab. So you're going to turn this over and we're going to be folding it from the long part. It's only a 1/2 inch difference, so you do have to kind of pay attention. When it's a square, it doesn't matter as much. So I'm going to fold this and I'm going to fold it in half, wrong sides together, and press. And I'm going to open that back up and I'm going to fold each of these raw edges into that crease that we just made. So they're both going into the center. And then because it's so short and it's easy to do, I'm just going to fold that over. So the two folds I just made are here. This is the first one that we pressed, and I'm going to press that again. Now just to cool that off and really set those seams, I'm going to hit it with my quilter's clapper. So now it is just slightly over a 1/2 inch. I'm going to test and make sure it's going to go through there nicely. Yep, that works. So that's how easy it is to make that tab. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to sew to hold that together. You can either just sew down the one side or you can sew down both sides for a little bit more of a polished look. Totally up to you. So we'll go to the sewing machine and we will get that done. Now I'm going to take my tab and I'm going to put it through the D-ring on that lobster claw, fold it in half, match those raw edges. So I'm just going to sew straight across just so that it will stay in place when we sew it into the tissue holder. You want to make sure you sew a little bit less than 1/4 inch from that edge so that that kind of basting stitch doesn't show once you put your whole tissue holder together. I'm going to prep the actual tissue box, the first step of that. So you're going to put these two pieces right side together. One of them is 1 inch shorter than the other, and that is the one that is going to create these 1/4 inch cute little accents right where your tissues come out. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up one of the short edges and have that sew 1 inch there, and then just clip or pin that. We're going to sew down that side. Then we are going to match the other edge. So you'll see there's a buckle, right? The 1 inch extra fabric in here. And I'm going to clip that side. So now when I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam down both of these sides. I'm going to use just a little extra scrap of this fabric as a leader fabric so that when we sew, this is going to go over all of the feed dogs. And when I start sewing, I'll start sewing in here so that if there's any kind of bird's nest or dragging, it will go on that leader fabric that's just a throwaway fabric and not on my project. When you're starting off of the edge of something, it's easier to use a leader fabric than to go through all the steps to raise your bobbin thread. Then once I get onto my project, I'll just go back a little bit to knot that. I'm going to turn this around to do the other side of the tissue cover. Now we're back to the ironing board. We have our lobster claw sewn onto that tab. We're going to turn this right side out. Because this tan was bigger than this blue icon, it's going to come off the edges a 1/4 inch. So it's going to make this little part there. So we're going to flatten that out so that the edge is even on both sides. So you don't want to iron it like that, or totally like that. You want it to be centered so you have the same amount of that brown or whatever you're using for the inside of your tissue holder on each side. So once you feel like you have that down, you're just going to press that. Then you're going to fold it into the center. Now you can either just kind of eyeball it and then use a ruler to measure, or if you want to, you can fold it in half, kind of finger press. You do not need to iron that because you don't want to keep a crease there, but you can kind of see it. And then you're going to fold these edges into the center like that. And then we are going to press. Now comes the placement of the clasp. So if you look at this finished one, we don't want the clasp to be where the accent part is, right? We want it to be in between. And if we want to be able to do this box corner, it basically needs to be lined up right next to where that edge is. I'm going to open this up, I'm going to put that down like that, and I'm going to line it up right with that edge. That will give us enough room to do the boxed corner without messing with this and not have this flopping into the hole. So I'm going to do that, fold that back down, clip that in place. And then I'm just going to put 2 clips on this end. And now we are going to go sew those closed. I'm going to use my leader fabric again, and I'm going to sew down both sides with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I have the clasp right here, so we want to make sure that stays in place because I didn't baste it. If you're feeling nervous about it, you could baste it in place before doing this, but for something this small, I've got faith in us. You want to make sure these are going to be staying together as you sew the ends together. So in my original video, I showed you to either serge or zigzag over the edge so that that wasn't going to fray when you're putting tissues in and out of it, because you don't want all of this happening. But this time I'm going to try something different and we'll just see how it works. I'm going to be using pinking shears, and I'm just going to cut the edge, but not cut the stitching with the pinking shears. Ooh, that's really thick to be cutting with pinking shears. I can do it. Or you can also use a wavy rotary blade. But cutting that shape is going to prevent large pieces of thread from fraying from this fabric. So this is going to work just as well. And then I don't have to change the plate and the foot on my sewing machine. So we have that. Now, if we didn't want to do the boxed corners, we would just turn it right side out and it would be done. You would put your tissues in there and it has the cute little tab with the lobster clasp. But we're going to make this a little bit more finished. So I'm going to turn it back again. We're going to do these corners. So what you do is basically this seam line needs to match that fold line. So you're going to put your fingers in there and you're going to fold it like that so that that seam is kind of in the middle, making a triangle. And if you felt it, you could feel that the seam was under this fold. Then I'm going to grab a pen. I'm going to grab a ruler. Now we don't want this to be very big. We want it to just be big enough for a pack of tissues. So you're going to draw a line 3/8 of an inch from the point. So I just have that lined up. Draw on there. And then I'm just going to sew across. Use my scissors to make sure that stays down. And then I'm just going to repeat that on the other 3 corners. Now, when you're doing each end, you want to make sure you fold the edge the same direction so that it's going to make everything sit better. So because I folded this one forward, I'm going to fold this side forward as well. See that? So it's going the same way instead of having it kind of twisted. It's one of those little things that will make a difference in how this is going to sit and work. Now I'm on the part where we have that little tab. So I want to make sure that when I'm pressing that down, that I'm not catching the tab in this corner at all. So just kind of feel your way. You shouldn't if you put it right next to that accent piece. Okay, last one. Now we just are going to turn that right side out. And we have nice finished boxed corners. And we have a little lobster clasp so that we can hook that onto something else. Hook it onto your belt buckle, whatever. So let's take a look at one thing before we put the tissues in. So on this one, I did a zigzag edge. And this one, we used the pinking shears. So this is a much more finished look than this, but this is a lot faster. Either is going to work and hold up. You're not going to get a lot of fraying from that. But if you want to go the extra mile, throw that zigzag foot on there. I just wanted to try the other way since I hadn't tried that before. So then it will hold an entire travel tissue pack. There will be a link below the video. You can buy these in bulk on Amazon. It's less expensive than going to the Dollar Tree. Sometimes even just the value packs at places like Target and Walmart are cheaper. One thing you need to notice is these packs definitely have a top and a bottom. So if I grab this, the tissue pulls and then it's going to pull the next one. Now, if I turn the other side, it's folded on both of these sides, so it's not going to pull out right. So just pay attention to which direction it came out of the bag and make sure that is up. So then you're just going to tuck the corners into one side like that. And then just lift the other side over the other corners. And then just move it a little bit and look how cute. So you can do them plain like that, or really easily add a tab. I wouldn't add anything bigger than this because, I mean, you could put a bigger tab onto this size or a bigger D-ring onto this size tab, but there's not a lot of space. We had enough space to make this corner well and to not hit that. But if you did anything wider, it would be too big. So now the new question isn't just boxed corners versus not. It's hang tab versus not. Let me know in the comments what you think.
If your lip balm knows how to hide in your purse as well as a dog that doesn't want to go to the vet, then you need to watch this tutorial and learn how easy it is to make a cute lip balm holder. These are so convenient, and when you use the key fob hardware, you can attach your key to it too. You can hook it in your purse, hook it onto your water bottle, anything with a hook. But before we get started, my name is Tara Reed. I am an artist and fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs. Be sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure you click that little bell so YouTube knows that you want to know when I post new videos, which is about weekly. So let's dive into this and get our lip balm under control. Let's dive into how easy it is to make a lip balm holder with fabric interfacing and a 1-inch key fob. What you're going to need to start is a 15-inch by 2 1/4 inch strip of fabric and also the same size fusible interfacing. And I am using the 911 fusible featherweight interfacing from Pellon. Then a pen or a heat resistant pen. You can use a regular one if you need to. Your key fob hardware. I highly recommend getting the pliers. It makes it much easier, but if you need to, you can use a hammer to close that if you don't want to invest in this. But key fob holders are one of my favorite things, so I recommend you invest in it. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the interfacing on the wrong side of our fabric, and the interfacing, you know which side is which, because one side you can see, I don't know if you can see the little bumps. That is the part that fuses or melts to your fabric. So that part needs to be down, and then it's smooth on the other side. If you do it backwards, you're going to put a bunch of glue, gunk on your iron. Not the best. So you're going to put it down like this and line those up. And then, because every once in a while you make a mistake and you do it backwards, right? Tell me I'm not the only one. You can also use a pressing cloth, which you can buy these that are specifically pressing cloths. It's just a thin piece of cotton. I like it because you can see through it often. And you can put that over top. So if for some reason some of the fusible material gets between the fabric and your iron, it's going to go onto this pressing cloth and not onto your iron. So I'm going to get that done and then show you what to do next. Now I have the interfacing ironed onto the back side of the fabric, and that's just going to give us a little bit more stability with our fabric and our little holder when we're done. Now we're going to fold it in half and match these ends. Fold that down and either put a pin in it to make sure this part doesn't slide while we do the next part, or I sometimes just do a clip at the bottom, just depending on what I have. We're going to line this up. So see, each of these thicker lines, that's 1 inch. So we want to center this fabric on a 1-inch increment. And because we did 2 1/4, it's going to be just shy of each of these little dotted lines. Okay, so there's our 1 inch. Now I'm going to make a mark 1/4 inch to each side of that 1 inch because we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam. What we're trying to do right now is to figure out the angle to cut this so that the tip is the same width as your 1-inch key fob hardware. We could leave it out and it could just go like that, but I just think it looks more finished this way and it doesn't take a lot more work. So we make a mark and then about 3/4 of an inch down on each side. Then you're just going to draw a little line, make sure it stays together, and you're just going to cut. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew down each of the angle and each of the long sides. Leave this end open for turning using a 1/4 inch seam. Now we're going to turn this right side out and we're going to use this cute little flamingo turning tool to make sure the angle there and the points are out. All right, now I got it most of the way out. Now I'm just going to gently run this along that seam at the top. So we get that 1-inch part out. And I just kind of roll the seams to make sure it's all out nicely. Flatten it as much as I can with my fingers. Then we're just going to iron that flat. Now I'm just going to take it back to the sewing machine and either do a quick zigzag, or you can just do a straight stitch right close to that. It's going to be inside. So this part right here is going to be deep in here. So if you want to just do a straight stitch, you can. And that's what I'm going to do, and I'll be right back. So I just did a straight stitch there, because it's going to stop that from fraying. It's going to be inside, and I did not feel like changing my presser foot. Now, this part is really important if you have directional fabric, which I do. You can tell more from a bigger piece. See, most of the fruit looks good this way, and it looks upside down this way. So you want to make sure it doesn't look upside down when you're done your holder. You want these grapes going the direction that it hangs, if that's what ends up on here. So you're going to do it like this, and look, these are backwards. So we're going to turn it over this way. So this is going to be the front. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold this up an inch. Just use this handy dandy little ruler. Fold that up an inch. Press that. So we're sewing a 1/4 inch from this folded edge, but I'm going to turn it over because the underside when you do the knot and everything sometimes looks a little bit worse. So we're going to make sure this looks really good from the top because this will be the side that we see. And then we're going to turn it back so that the raw edge is up, and this is going to be the front because the fruit is right side up. Now we're going to turn it up about 2.5 inches. But before I sew that, I always check, grab your favorite lip balm, shout out to Burt's Bees. So I always check to make sure that when it goes in, it's going to stick out a little bit so that it's easy to grab in and out of this holder. I'm just going to clip both sides. Now, one thing to be careful of is sometimes this raw edge like sticks out on the corner. So just make sure you tuck that in as you sew around. I am using a Janome sewing machine with a 1/4 inch walking foot, and I find it works a lot better than the traditional foot, even if it's a walking foot, because this 1/4 inch has like one walker that's right in the center, whereas the other one has it on both sides and it only grabs one side of the fabric when you're sewing really close. So if you have that option, make sure you use it. Now we're just going to sew all around here about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. And you're going to double back where this meets, just so it's more secure, because that's going to be the area that gets the most use, putting your lip balm in and out. I don't know if you can see this. I'm seeing a little bit of that edge, so I'm just going to tuck that under with my scissors before I sew over that. All that's left is to go add the key fob. The last step is to attach our hardware, which is basically a piece of metal, and it's got these little, I don't know, triangles that are going to dig into and attach to the fabric to keep that nice and secure. And it comes with a key ring. And there's a link below the video to find them on Amazon if you are on my YouTube channel or my website. So it's going to line up like that. So you can either do it like that and put it in to the pliers. I highly recommend the pliers. If you don't have any, what you're going to do is you're going to line this up, put a little piece of fabric over there and gently hammer it. Put fabric on there so that you don't dent or scratch the metal, so that it'll still look good. But I love key fobs, definitely worth the pliers. And this is what I've learned over the years of doing key fobs. The easiest way to do it is to set your hardware in your key fob first. And this gently close it so it'll hold, right? So it holds there. Then take whatever you're putting into it and put it in and double check on both sides to make sure it's lined up with the top so it looks nice and professional. And then you simply squeeze. And that's it. It is done. It is ready for your lip balm.
Okay, what do you think? Are you sold? Are you going to do some practical things that teachers are going to love to have and use? And are you or are you not going to personalize them with charms? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know your thoughts, which ones are speaking to you. And if you have other tutorials that you would love to see that you can't find on my channel, leave a comment and I will add it to my very long list of ideas. Have a great day and happy sewing.